later, we are experiencing a kind of deja vu as the special counsel investigates whether the president allegedly abused his power, again by obstructing an inquiry into a possible manipulation of our country's elections. Just as was the case in Watergate, whatever special counsel Robert Mueller uncovers will likely mark the beginning, rather than the end, of a reassessment of how power actually operates in this country. And just as in Watergate, there's the possibility that Mueller's far-reaching probe may reveal how tightly political corruption and corporate corruption are linked through bribery just under the surface of America's political life. Nixon was the recipient of secret corporate donations, which were considered illegal because they should have been disclosed. But the payments, while unlawful, did not compromise the presidential election itself. Mueller's Russian inquiry is directed at a potentially far more serious crime. Whether Donald Trump, the head of a sprawling business empire, colluded with a foreign power to deliberately sway the American electorate, committing the very crime that the FCPA had been trying to eradicate since Watergate, the author of a foreign bribe, a kickback. That law specifically states that a corporate bribe need not involve an actual exchange of money. An offer of anything of value, such as a promise to a foreign government official, is sufficient to violate its terms. This is precisely what Mueller is trying to ascertain, whether Trump, his company, his associates, or his family, or some combination of them, offered a promise to Russian government officials, a quid pro quo, that if they helped Trump by manipulating the elections, Trump, if victorious, would ease U.S. sanctions against Russia. Doing so would allow greater U.S. investment of Russia and would benefit Russian officials and oligarchs, the Trump business organization, the corporate interests of the Trump family, and former members of his senior staff, including Paul Manafort, his one-time campaign chairman, and Michael Flynn, his disgraced national security advisor. If the Trump organization or anyone connected with it did make such a promise, and depending on how that promise was conveyed to Russian officials, the Justice Department would have strong grounds for pursuing an FCPA charge, among others. An FCPA violation is within Mueller's mandate to investigate, quote, any matters that arose or may arise directly from this investigation. As has been widely observed, Mueller has hired 2 former federal law enforcement officials with extensive experience in investigating fraud, money laundering, and overseas bribery. Andrew Weissman, who ran the Justice Department's fraud section, which enforces the FCPA, and Greg Andres, who helped oversee FCPA policy in the criminal division. The drama playing out in Washington starkly highlights the fact that foreign corporate bribery can be a deeply misleading term. We have come to regard it, when we think of it at all, as something that unscrupulous companies do in distant countries, so that any impact it has must be contained overseas. If a corporation pays kickbacks to a greedy government official abroad, why should we be concerned? But in a highly interconnected world, bound together by a global market, a global financial system, and the constant migration of peoples, goods, capital, corruption rarely stays out there. Bribes eventually harm Americans, American society, American values, and American interests, both domestically and around the world, in ways that are difficult to gauge. Why do firms resort to bribery? The obvious reason is to gain an advantage over their competitors. But illicit payments also buy the illusion of growth in the short term, of increased market share and inflated firm value. It does not take into account the harm that this practice causes to companies themselves, sinking employee morale, diminished profit margins, and the possibility of hundreds of millions of dollars in fines and penalties, not to mention a reputation that will be associated with corruption and deceit. They also effectively steal the public's money because the majority of bribery cases involve capital-intensive development and infrastructure projects such as roads, dams, defense systems, oil extraction, or mining that are publicly funded. To recoup the bribes involved in winning such contracts, companies conspire with foreign officials to inflate the costs, sometimes by 10 or even hundreds of millions of dollars. While the companies and the officials win out, taxpayers are left shouldering the burden. Corporate bribes involve a remarkable amount of money. The World Bank has estimated $1 trillion a year, although this may represent the high end. Others have placed the market at 10% of the $4 trillion spent annually on global public procurement. The book Kickback by David Montero.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, happy Tuesday. At least we're safe here in the United States. In Mariupol, the Russians are refusing to leave an estimated, well, tens of thousands. This is a city of, hundreds of thousands of people. There are tens of thousands of people still there, maybe even over 100,000. And the Russians are refusing to open a corridor for them to safely escape. And now we're hearing reports that they are, quote, willingly firing on the facility in Mariupol where civilians, particularly older and disabled people and children who would have had a hard time fleeing up to this point, where they're hiding out, where they're trying to find safety and protection. No water, no sewage, no electricity for almost 2 months now. This is brutality raised to the level of genocide. This is a war crime to beat. Pretty much, well, this is just nuts. Okay, so a lot going on in our program today. I want to get into the lifting of the mask mandate and mass transit. This is a fascinating story. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Also, how the Democratic leadership is suffering from a serious deficiency of outrage. A Geeky Science about a new study on how COVID causes micro brain bleeds that lead to dementia and loss of executive function, which is a fancy psychological way of saying the ability to restrain bad behavior. Does this explain Trump humpers who are like out there doing road rage attacks and things? In our second hour, Sylvia Earle is going to drop by, Dr. Sylvia Earle. Everyone, she says, is inextricably connected to and utterly dependent upon the existence of the oceans. So what is the state of our seas? And is Rick Scott's new Republican plan a theocratic, racist, homophobic, autocratic giveaway? I'll get into that in the second hour of the program. In the third hour of the program, Elizabeth Warren says there's only one way to avoid a political disaster in November. We'll talk about what she's saying, what she's arguing, where she's right and where maybe she's just a little off, and what we can do about it in the third hour of the program. But I want to start with this mask mandate. This federal judge, Judge Mizell, Catherine Kimball Mizell, was appointed by Donald Trump in November of 2020 after he had lost the election. The American Bar Association had rated this 33-year-old as unqualified to be a federal judge. And yet, Donald Trump gave her a lifetime appointment on the federal bench. She then ruled that where the law that created the Environmental Protection Agency and the CDC, so this is specific to the CDC actually, the EPA is more, Neil Gorsuch is, he wants to take them on. But when Congress granted the CDC, they gave them the power to take such measures as they deem necessary, in the word of the law, necessary, to protect public health, including things like, quote, sanitation. And the CDC has been interpreting sanitation as a mask mandate. And she says, no, I went to high school. Now, keep in mind, she canceled the oral arguments in this case. Both sides' lawyers were prepared to make an argument before her. She canceled that. She said, that's okay, I got this stuff. I understand these things. I am an unqualified judge according to the American Bar Association, but I'll show you. And she said, when the law says sanitation, they're not talking about things like mask mandates. They're talking about bleach. They're talking about the CDC having the ability to require hygienic steps. She said if Congress intended this definition, the power bestowed on the CDC would be breathtaking, and it would not be limited to modest measures of, quote, sanitation like masks. She said the CDC could require businesses to install air filtration systems. Oh, my God. Could mandate that people take vaccines. We see that this is clearly tyranny. And even require people to cough into their elbows and take daily multivitamins. This is the best mind the Republican Party has. So she says, okay, so what if you're flying and you're immune compromised?
So what if you are flying and you're taking a drug for your arthritis that reduces the efficiency and effectiveness of your own immune system and its response to vaccines? So what if you're flying with children who are too young to be vaccinated? Brooke Tansley tweets, "Here we are trapped in the sky with our 8-month-old unmasked baby." You can't really put a mask on a baby that young, under the supposition that everyone on the flight will be masked, and Flight 325's flight crew has just taken away our choices from us. We are very angry about this. She says, "I'm on a plane with my 2 not yet eligible for vax kids, and the pilot just announced that the mask mandate just ended this minute. We don't have the opportunity to make travel choices that fit with our family's vaccination status and risk comfort level. We are trapped in the air." Now, the fact of the matter is that this mask mandate was supposed to expire in 2 weeks, but that could have been extended. This decision by this Trump-appointed single federal judge who took it upon herself to lay this on the whole country as if she was the friggin' Supreme Court. She's not even an appeals court judge. She's just a federal district judge who was rated, did I tell you, unqualified by the American Bar Association, but is a big follower of Donald Trump and right-wing, this is crazy. This is just absolutely crazy. How would you respond to this? I'm like, I was thinking, okay, my best friend Jerry lives in New York. I was thinking of going out and visiting him. He was thinking about coming out and visiting us. On the assumption that it was relatively safe to fly because you could wear a mask on a plane. One of my kids' parents-in-law are in their 80s, and they came out and visited a week or so ago, didn't get COVID because everybody was wearing masks. Thank God. Right? But people in their 80s and 90s, do you think they're going to get on airplanes? Do you think the airlines are going to get some blowback? Are they going to get a whole bunch of cancellations now? Or am I just like way out on a limb here? Way too concerned about this. Which brings us to our Geeky Science. This was published first over at dailycoz.com by Nova Psyche. It's basically a new study out of Tulane University down in New Orleans. And they were looking at changes in the brains using things like CT scans and pathology reports from people who had died of COVID or other diseases, but had COVID, and then they just cross-section their brains. And what they found is that even in mild forms or onsets of the disease, even with asymptomatic presentation, in other words, no symptoms, the brain may experience diffuse yet profound insult in the form of innumerable microbleeds throughout the brain. This follows another study that was done in Europe that said that, quote, COVID-19 is associated with a 33-fold increase in pulmonary embolism and blood clots, and a 5-fold increase in deep vein thrombosis due to blood clotting abnormalities. This from the study at Tulane University, quote, "This work reveals neuroinflammation, brain hypoxia, microhemorrhages, and pathology consistent with hypoxic ischemic injury." In other words, strokes that cause a lack of oxygen to part of the brain and kill that part of the brain. "Our findings are consistent with those reported on autopsied brains of human subjects who died with SARS-CoV-2 infections." They just basically lay it right out. In this is from the study, right? In logistic regression analyses, the presence of microbleeds was the only independent predictor of executive dysfunction. Now, what is executive dysfunction? That means the inability to restrain yourself. This is something that happens in the frontal part of the prefrontal cortex. And when it's damaged, this was Phineas Gage, the guy who was driving a stake back in the 1860s in the railroads, and this giant railroad stake, for the holding down the rails, flies up and goes right into the middle of his forehead. And suddenly, this very nice guy that everybody liked becomes an ass And he starts swearing at people and grabbing women's behinds and just doing all kinds of things that normally, you know, people think about, but they restrain themselves from doing. He lost all restraint. So back to the study. In logical regression analysis, the presence of microbleeds from COVID was the only independent predictor of executive dysfunction. Interestingly, in individuals with executive dysfunction, microbleeds were predominantly located in the frontal lobes and basal ganglia, areas classically considered the neuroanatomical substrate for executive function. Executive function, again, being, you know, our highest functions, our thought processes that result in restraint of behavior. These results suggest that microbleeds may actually have a negative effect on cognition, independent of other concurrent vascular lesions, and there seems to be an anatomical correlation between the distribution of microbleeds and the cognitive domains affected, suggesting a direct damage of microbleeds over the tissue as the pathogenic mechanism. It can lead to what they call dysexecutive syndrome, which, by the way, is what some people call ADHD in its mildest forms, dysexecutive syndrome in its mildest forms. They add brain fog. It may later lead to dementia resembling Alzheimer's disease. If the virus concentrates in the basal ganglia, as has been suggested by the Tulane study, we may see a dramatic increase in corticobasal dementia as the years progress, with symptoms resembling those of traumatic injury to the brain. Brilliant. But hey, if you're on an airplane, if you're trapped on an airplane, the airline says everybody can take their masks off and expose you to their diseases. Not only are we going to see more COVID, we're going to see more flu, we're going to see more RSV. You know, in the Asian countries, where I've traveled and worked for years and years and years, Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, I've been to all of them. And this was like 30, 40 years ago. During flu season, people wore masks, both to protect other people, but also if they had any symptoms at all, they would wear a mask as a sign of respect. We do not have a respectful society in this country. Right-wing ideology over the last 40 years has just turned us all into, hey, me, 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 me.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And me doesn't want to wear a mask anymore. Who cares how many people get sick? We'll be back. By the way, just to follow up on that, and my question, would you consider flying now? Just a straight up question. I mean, I was seriously considering flying, and now I'm thinking, no way. I am not going to expose myself to this disease until we've got a better, more just absolutely airtight, the measles vaccine means that you're not going to get measles. Right, the mumps vaccine means you're not going to get mumps. The flu vaccine means you got a 50-50 chance. If flu is that deadly, I'd be worried about that. The COVID vaccine, again, yeah, you can still get it. In fact, it's better than a 50% chance you'll get it if you're exposed to high levels of it. You just won't get it so badly that you end up in the hospital. Okay, so that's the kind of bad news. The good news is that Moderna just published new clinical data that found that they got this brand new shot. It is not available yet to the public. The plan is that this vaccine will be available to the public this fall. And they're calling it the bivalent booster vaccine, also known as mRNA-1273.214. And bivalent means, bi, two, valent sides, essentially, two different types. It's a dual vaccine. It has the kind of normal vaccine, the normal Moderna vaccine against all the previous COVIDs, but it also has a whole brand new mRNA vaccine that specifically targets Omicron and the other variants that have derived from Omicron. I mean, there's two brand new ones from Omicron that are just now starting to sweep through the Northeast. Pittsburgh went into, has reinstated mask mandates. They say our latest booster candidate, mRNA 127.3.214, which combines the currently authorized Moderna COVID-19 booster with our Omicron-specific booster candidate, remains our lead candidate for the fall 2022 Northern Hemisphere booster. We believe that this bivalent booster vaccine, if authorized, will create a new tool as we continue to respond to emerging variants. That sounds like good news to me. Shane in Boulder, Colorado. Hey, Shane, what's on your mind?
Yeah, hi. I just heard you talking about wearing masks on the plane and about Asia. And I just returned from Nepal, from Kathmandu, Nepal. Mm-hmm. And everyone in Kathmandu, everybody in Nepal, they wear a mask.
Yeah.
And nobody is throwing a tantrum. Nobody is uncomfortable. Nobody is freaking out because everybody's wearing a mask. It's like putting your shoes on.
Right. Yeah, well, this is, most of your Asian societies are very much, we're all in this together kind of societies, probably because of centuries of high population density.
Exactly. And, and on the plane, everybody was wearing a mask. And so now if they drop the mask mandate, I wouldn't fly either.
Yeah. I just think this is nuts. And I think the airlines are going to suffer as a consequence of it. Although maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's more people who are just willing to take chances, and they're going to learn the hard way. Shane, thanks for the exclamation mark at the end of my rant. I appreciate it. It's great to hear from you. We'll be right back. It's 22 minutes past the hour. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. Have you noticed that people are basically imitating Donald Trump all over the country? We're seeing all this rude behavior, sexist, racist behavior. People getting arrested at airport gates, airplanes being turned around because people are fighting with flight attendants, disorderly, rude, unhinged conduct. I mean, it's just gone nuts. Car crashes are up, gun deaths are up, shootings are up. Healthcare workers are being literally physically assaulted in some hospitals. They're having to put together panic buttons. This kind of behavior in our schools is increasing. It looks like, according to some sociologists, psychologists, and even business consultants, it looks like a lot of this ties back not just to the Trump presidency, with Donald Trump providing us with an example of how to be, an obnoxious person, but also the crisis of the pandemic. We've got a deeper dive into this topic over at thomhartmann.com. There's a great video about it. You can check it out there. And welcome back. The other story I wanted to flag for you, and this is sort of a follow-up on a conversation that we sort of started yesterday. But yesterday afternoon when Louise and I were talking about what will be my opening rant tomorrow, and of course it's always subject to change based on the news. In fact, today's opening rant wasn't this; it was about COVID and airplanes. But we were talking about how can Democrats destroy the MAGA movement? How can Democratic, frankly, I think it's going to take Democratic outrage. And there's a story here that I think is really important. You look at the difference in the response between Republicans who are hysterical that Hunter Biden made $3 million being on the board of a corporation because of his daddy's name, and Jared Kushner, who couldn't even get a security clearance, steering American foreign policy to give millions of dollars worth of weapons to Saudi Arabia after Congress voted no, and covering up for the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, and then taking $2 billion for it. And the Saudis also given Steve Mnuchin $1 billion, and God only knows how much money they gave Donald Trump and is stashed in his money bin overseas. Congress isn't investigating it, neither is Department of Justice. We'll probably never know. So why is it that Republicans tolerate breathtaking levels of corruption and criminality among their elected representatives and cronies, but Democrats won't? I would argue that the reason why is because Republicans, by and large, have bought into the authoritarian mindset. And in the authoritarian world, when the authoritarian leader actually breaks the law, that makes authoritarian followers feel safer because they think that that authoritarian leader can manipulate the law to their benefit, ultimately. And this was the hallmark of the Trump administration. And breaking the law is like, you know, this is what we do. This is what we're proud of. So how do you break the bond between authoritarian followers and authoritarian leaders? You have to take down the authoritarian leaders. You have to point out their crimes. You have to hold them accountable for their crimes. You have to strip them of their power and ideally, you know, throw them in jail. And if Democrats fail to do this, if they fail to follow through on this with Donald Trump, this is going to get a hell of a lot worse. And the neo-fascist authoritarian movement in this country is going to take flight like you never saw before. And if Democrats do hold Donald Trump to account, and he does have to pay for his crimes, then you're going to see the MAGA movement shatter. And it's going to be a real challenge for Ron DeSantis, who wants to be the next MAGA president.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
If you want all the details, it's titled How Democratic Outrage Can End Trump's Reign, and it's over at hartmannreport.com.
We're in this camera, right? 3. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Minority Leader, How to Lead from the Outside and Make Real Change by Stacey Abrams. This is from chapter 1, although the introduction is fascinating too, where she talks about, you know, Rhodes scholarships and stuff, but this is chapter 1. I sit in a living room, a cozy space, warm in the early summer. I'm perched on the edge of a sofa next to Valerie, the home's owner, a lovely black woman in her late 40s. Across from us, seated close together on a wide settee meant for one, are her 2 children, a son and a daughter. Politicians rarely visit their streets, which are nestled in a poorer community in South Georgia. Valerie beams with pride that both her children are headed to college in the fall. David, 17, plans to study criminology. Maya, 18, her belly round with her first child, intends to become a middle school teacher. Both newly graduated from high school, Maya will give birth in mere weeks and begin college months later, an unwed teen mother. Her intended school is more than 3 hours north of her home, so her mother will raise her newborn baby while she starts her freshman year. Valerie speaks matter-of-factly about the coming challenge, raising a new child just as hers leaves the nest. Still, she is determined that both her children pursue college degrees that she never received. Maya, the mother-to-be, wonders how she'll do so far away from home and her baby. Yet in the next breath, she explains how college will be the best for her and her child. Their future success rests upon her. I've come to their home as part of my campaign for governor, so I asked Valerie what she expects of someone like me. What can I do to help make lives like hers better? In her soft voice, she replies, she just wants options for financial aid for her children. They will succeed, she says, if they can afford to stay in school. As I look around the modest home passed down through the generations, I understand both the pride and the desperation tangled in her response. She got them through and has given them the tools to carve out better lives for themselves. We chat more about the worries she's lived with all those years, our discussion turning to the crime and poverty in their neighborhood. Then I ask Valerie what she wants. At first, all I get in response is a quizzical look to suggest I need to reconsider my bid for higher office. Or that suggests. I repeat, what do you want for you? What secret dream do you have for yourself? Her confused expression turns to one of surprise. I don't know, she tells me. I've been a cashier at the Piggly Wiggly for 20 years. You must want something, I probe, something you'd like to do for you? A daycare, she admits quietly. I'd like to start a daycare center for unwed mothers like my daughter, so more girls can finish school and pursue their dreams. But that ambition is beyond her. Her body language, her tone of voice, her averted gaze speak louder than her words. I press her, but she demurs with a smile. Let's just see what happens if you win the governor's job, she says. Valerie's house in South Georgia is not too different from the squat red brick house where I grew up in South Street. on South Street in Gulfport, Mississippi. An oak tree grew out in our front yard, shadowing the front sidewalk, forbidding grass to grow beneath its shade. Pink azaleas bloomed each spring from bushes that flanked the front door. Our rented house and the other set close by teemed with children, all black, all working class. We played in our postage-stamped yards, make believing the fantastical, superhero exploits, cops and robbers. As we got older, we'd talk about moving to New Orleans or living in one of the mansions along the beachfront that lay less than 5 miles away, across the railroad tracks that ran in between our neighborhood and the more wealthy environs. We dreamed of more, while our parents' lives centered around survival and making it from paycheck to paycheck. Instinctively, we understood that more had to be possible, even if we didn't know what to do to get there. These imaginings, these desires, are the roots of ambition. As adults, like Valerie, we tend to edit our desires until they fit our construction of who we're supposed to become. In such a world, I wouldn't dare dream of running for higher office, for mayor or governor or president. At least for now, Valerie sees herself retiring in 20 more years from Piggly Wiggly as a cashier, rather than as a small business owner who helps the community raise its children. From our brief meeting, I could see she had the fire, albeit of a low burn, of a minority leader. She had ambition, she had vision, but she didn't have the faith, and understandably so. Whether we come from working class neighborhoods or grow up comfortably middle class, minorities rarely come of age explicitly thinking about what we want and how to get it. People already in power almost never have to think about whether they belong in the room, much less if they would be listened to once outside. These men, and they are usually men and typically white, do not have to grapple with low expectations based on gender or race or class. Ambition for them begins with reminiscences of old times and older friendships or newer alliances. The ends have already been decided. Only the means are to be discussed. Most potential minority leaders feel the same lack of faith Valerie had, at least at some point in their evolution. We may not know how to get the first job, let alone make it to the big chair. We don't know how to take the leap from accepting our fates to actually changing them, and not just a little, but radically. Then there are those who simply don't know what they want. The drive to achieve burns inside, often without a clear target. We want to be something, but what that is remains hazy. Often we cannot articulate our goals because they lie just beyond the reach of who we're supposed to be. Ambition's scale is irrelevant. What holds us back is not scope, it's fear. And because we don't know what to call our dreams, don't know how to make them happen, or are pretty sure we'll be disappointed, we just stand still. But becoming a minority leader demands that we embrace ambition as our due. Stacey Abram.
Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. It's just incredible. We're going to get into Rick Scott's plan in a few minutes, but, are you willing to travel on planes now? I mean, this is nuts. Pat from Seattle, who is currently in Hawaii. Hey, Pat, what's on your mind today?
Hey, well, I just got this news. I have to fly out in a few hours.
Oh, my.
From Hawaii back home, where I take up my cancer treatment again first thing tomorrow morning.
Oh, no.
And I use miles to get first class to be further from people. I don't go in an elevator with anybody. My kids, they bring all our food to our patio. No using the pool. I mean, I'm just, this trip was to get together with the grandkids and stuff because, my treatment's not going well. We're trying to get together,
I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, now I find out I have to fly all the way home with no masks on people.
Yeah.
I'm just beside myself.
Yeah, well, please be sure to wear a KN95 mask, a good mask.
That's
that will
all I've
protect
got,
you.
and I don't even take it off on the street, I mean, it's been beautiful to be here and be able to be outside with the family and whatnot, but this mask thing in the airplane is to happen, and, obviously it's not just me. I have absolutely no choice in the matter. I mean, I would not have come if I'd known that this mask thing was going to happen for my trip home.
Yeah. Well, you can thank a Trumpy judge which is just insane in and of itself, that one district judge just altered, all the rules for all of America. And you can't be alone in this. There have to be people all over the country who took the chance on flying on the assumption that the air was safe, and now the air is no longer safe. And I just can't imagine what you must be struggling. I mean,
I'm just shaking right now because I need to pack and get ready to go. I don't have a choice.
Yeah. Well,
and I'm just dreading it.
I'm sorry, Pat. Have a drink and before you get on the plane and wear your mask.
I'm having a full edible.
Yeah, whatever it takes to get through it. It's
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
So,
well, good luck,
anyway.
Pat. I wish you the very best, and I'm sorry to hear your situation. This is, and thank you for the call. This is exactly what I'm talking about. There are literally millions of Americans who are undergoing cancer treatment right now, and some of them are flying. There are tens of millions of Americans who take all those drugs that you see advertised on TV for things like plaque psoriasis and arthritis that are actually immunosuppressants. These diseases, more often than not, are autoimmune diseases where the body's immune system attacks the body's own tissues, producing things like psoriasis or arthritis. And so you take a drug that downregulates your immune system. And, if you read the fine print that comes with these drugs, it's all about, hey, be sure to notify your doctor if you're taking a vaccine. You may have to stop the drug for a week before you take the vaccine, or the vaccine may cause a different kind of, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I'm not a physician and I'm not trying to offer medical advice here at all, but this is a reality for tens of millions of Americans, not to mention all the people in their 20s, 30s, maybe even their 40s who have children under 5 years old who can't get vaccinated. And they're stuck now in some other city beyond where they live and having to get on an airplane thinking that they had a 2-week grace period before the mask mandate. I mean, this is crazy. This is crazy. Teresa in Augusta, Georgia. Hey, Teresa, what's up?
Hey, I am trying to pull myself together after that last call because that was the reason why I wanted to make a comment today. I too do not understand how it is legally possible for one judge to, without any argument, any testimony, any expert opinion, to make a ruling that consequential. I mean, oh gosh, I feel so bad for this lady.
Yeah, she canceled the oral arguments. This 33-year-old judge that the ABA said was unqualified, and Donald Trump put on the bench after he lost the election, and Republicans rubber stamped her. All the Democrats voted against her, but the Republicans controlled the Senate at that point in time, and he put her on the bench, and she was like, yeah. Here's how it works. Back in 1803, the Supreme Court, in a decision called Marbury versus Madison, decided that federal courts can rule on whether a law passed by Congress or a behavior of an executive branch agency, in this case the CDC, whether that is constitutional or not in the opinion of a judge. So a district judge like this rules, then the government, who she ruled against, would have to appeal that ruling. They would have to immediately appeal it to a federal appeals court. And I believe she's in Florida, so I think that's either the Fourth or Fifth Circuit. It's one or the other. I think it might be the Fifth Circuit down south there. So it would have to get appealed to that court. Now that court, both the Fourth and the Fifth Circuits, the two southern circuits, main southern circuits, have been heavily infiltrated by or populated by, let's say, Trumpy judges. I mean, this is something that Trump did.
Yeah.
And so, that has to happen. And the debate is right now in the Trump administration, do we appeal this? Not so much because we want the mask mandate to go back into effect today, although that could be one of the outcomes, but also because, the news media are all showing people cheering on airplanes, right? So because I think, people on airplanes are probably more likely to be Fox News viewers who don't care about these issues than people who have, the serious concerns, like our last caller. So in all probability, the Biden administration is not going to try and pick a fight. They're just going to let this go into effect. But I think it does need to be appealed just to get back to this issue of whether the CDC's authority to enforce sanitation is limited to wiping things down with bleach, or whether that also includes sanitary measures like wearing masks. It's just nuts. I mean, it's just absolutely nuts. Well,
what people need to be, these people need to be held accountable for their disastrous decisions.
Yeah. Well, and the place to hold them accountable is at the ballot box this November. I mean, the opportunity is coming. Teresa, thank you very much for the call. Carol in Auburn, Washington. Hey, Carol, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Last night, a reporter from the New Yorker was on, Rachel Maddow, and she's discovered that there's a dark money group that's putting money together to make sure that Biden gets no nominees in while he's in office. Have you heard about that?
I saw the segment with Jane Mayer, whose book Dark Money is an absolute must-read. Jane Mayer's been a guest on this program many times, and that was a brilliant segment. In fact, we should get her on to talk about this same thing because it was just breathtaking.
I agree. I think we should try to gear up here because the midterms are getting close, and these Republicans are putting a grip that we've got to keep our democracy. Democracy demands proper character, and there's definitely some improper character.
Yeah, I'm with you. Carol, thank you. Thanks for pointing that out. I had neglected to mention that, and it's true. Jackie in Port Orchard. Hey, Jackie, what's up?
Hey, progressive ideals are what's going to save our planet. And if all the Dems are not pushing hard and fast on all progressive ideals, we're going to fail.
Yeah.
There's no more allowing for non-progressive ideals to even exist. We have a small chance to save this planet, and if we're pushing anything else, we're going to fail. And Manchin and Sinema have played the Democrats like fools. And you're right, Tom. Democrats are the opposite of authoritarians, but they have a duty to stand up to and shut down authoritarian ideals.
Yeah, I'm with you. And authoritarianism is, this is it's the great poison of our time. It's poison for democracy. It's poison for our country. Jackie, thank you for the call. Benny in Louisville, Kentucky. Hey, Benny, what's on your mind?
I was calling, Tom, because these people are so happy that the mask mandate has been lifted. Then why are they so upset about the policy, what is it called, 42 on the border, that keeps immigrants from coming in because of COVID?
Right.
They want to keep that in place, but they want to lift the mandate.
We'll spread COVID on airplanes, but we can't allow any immigrants or refugees, asylum seekers to come into the United States because they may have COVID. Oh, my God.
Yes. How much sense does that make?
Say what?
How much sense does that make?
Oh, how much sense does that make? Not a great deal, Benny. Not a great deal. And I think you're spot on. This is bizarre. I don't have a better word for it. It's just absolutely bizarre. And now we've got this federal judge. This is what happens when you elect Republicans. Is you get people. Thank you, Benny, for the call. Is you get people who don't believe in government. Republicans believe that the country should be run by the billionaire class, period, full stop. They take their money from the billionaire class. They pass legislation to help the billionaire class and to lower taxes on the billionaire class. And their attitude toward the rest of us is you guys can just go screw yourselves.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And that's their attitude toward democracy as well. They're all in on oligarchy and autocracy and strongman government, and they want to have nothing to do with American democracy. And welcome back. Dennis in Aptos, California. Hey, Dennis, what's up?
Well, I just wanted to say, Tom, COVID's on the rise again. This isn't the time to be dropping mandates.
Oh.
And in fact, I know 4 people who've gotten COVID recently in the last 3-4 weeks. And one says he got it flying from Istanbul to L.A. on a 14-hour direct flight. He said people had masks on. So, this isn't time to be dropping mandates, especially by Trump-pantsy judges who are 33 and don't know their what from what.
Right.
It's this crazy time. Mandates have been dropped just about everywhere. I know a cousin of mine in the Boston area, he's got COVID now. And these are all progressive thinking people I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
A neighbor a couple of blocks away. I didn't know anybody who got COVID during the height of it, if you want to call it that, 2 years ago. And here I have personal friends or relatives who are getting COVID. So I don't want to get it. I had a cold last week. I got tested 3 times, once by the local hospital where I live, twice with home tests. I didn't, all 3 were negative. Yeah. But I had a cold, and I'm thinking to myself, if I were to get COVID because my friend who got it, he said it was kind of like having the flu, and he's totally vaxxed, booster, right. 3 shots. He's going to get another booster. I get my booster next week. Yeah. So this is not the time to be dropping mandates, and I'm not surprised that people probably who fly the most are, like you just said, they're watching Fox. They believe all the BS, all the propaganda, and they don't know the truth. And so, sure, they're going to cheer and say, yay, we don't have to wear masks.
Right.
It's just not the time.
Or they've already had COVID and they feel invincible now. And they do have additional immunity as a consequence. They may also have a little brain dysfunction. But yesterday I was reading, last night I was reading the Oregonian, which is the statewide newspaper here in Oregon. And there was an article about how the test positivity rate, which had been around 1%. In other words, of the people who show up thinking, gee, maybe I've got COVID, I need to get tested, I've got a sore throat. 1% of people here in Oregon who showed up to get tested at a testing center actually had COVID. Well, that test positivity rate in the last week has gone from 1% to 7.6%. And the CDC guidelines are anytime it's over 5%, you've got to start taking, actions. You've got to start taking mitigating actions. But we have not imposed a mask mandate in this state. We're still very laissez-faire about this. And I think the politics of it are pretty much decided. And that's what I'm guessing the Biden administration is going to say is, hey, the Republicans, the conservatives, the Fox watchers, whatever you want to call it, and of course, people who've already had COVID and are vaccinated and therefore probably correctly feel like they have a really high level of immunity, and so they're willing to take chances that other people wouldn't take, and that's a large percentage of the population now. Probably about 60, 70 million of us have had COVID. So there's this pressure, but it leaves behind the people who are over 65. The people, and therefore the vaccines are not going to work quite as well. The people who are taking immunosuppressive drugs, the people like our first caller from Seattle, from Hawaii, who's on her way home to do another round of chemo. Those people are extraordinarily vulnerable, and children under 5 years old. Dennis, thank you for the call. We'll be right back. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. I don't know if you caught this, but there was a piece of legislation before the House of Representatives that explicitly required the U.S. State Department to preserve any evidence of war crimes committed by the Russian forces in Ukraine, to gather reports of it, to preserve it, presumably in anticipation of some sort of a war crimes prosecution. And for reasons I can't quite figure out, maybe you have an idea, 6 Republicans voted against this. No, we don't want the war crimes of the Putin administration to be. Thomas Massey from Kentucky, Scott Perry from Pennsylvania, Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia, Warren Davidson from Ohio, Andy Biggs from Arizona, and Paul Gosar from Arizona. I'm scratching my head here. Why would these 6 Republican politicians not want us to preserve the war crimes evidence. There's a video about this that you can see over at thomhartmann.com. And welcome back. 51 minutes past the hour, and Robert in Queens, New York. Hey, Robert, thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's up?
Oh, hi. How are you, Tom?
I'm great, but I'll get better, Robert.
Okay, I hope so. Listen, I've mentioned to the screener that what the media should be doing. Number one is every time we mention this story about the mask mandate, we should put that instead of just saying a judge overturned it, they should say a Trump-appointed judge
who was rated unqualified by the American Bar Association.
Exactly, and that's
who set aside the oral arguments in the case and said, "I don't want to hear the facts of the matter. I've got my opinion."
Okay, so given that, what can we do? I mean, we're finding this going on because Trump, he appointed a hell of a lot of judges, up and down,
like 300 of them.
Right, and the thing is, how do we fight this? How do we get rid of these clowns? Because they're going to keep on doing this. Even in New York, where I'm at now, the mayor here is toying with the fact of, we're going to get rid of this mandate, and that's what will happen when you have people from Wall Street in charge.
Yeah.
No one's going to tell me any different.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No,
and it keeps on going.
I am completely with you, and I think the media is doing a terrible job in not pointing out that the ABA found this woman not qualified. She should not be on the federal bench. She had no experience as a judge whatsoever, and only minimal experience as a lawyer. But she was a right winger, and she was against abortion, and so Donald Trump put her, and she was willing to recite the MAGA line up and down, so Donald Trump put her on the federal bench. This is crazy. Robert, thank you for the call. Janet in Savannah, Georgia. Hey, Janet, what's on your mind?
Hello, sir. Hello, how are you?
Good. What's up?
Oh, I just wanted to make a comment in regard to the judge who's not qualified, so I believe anyway. But I keep listening to all of us, and we found as Democrats and as the opposing party of the GOP so distraught that, like, the fight is over. The fight is not over. We have to November. If we can't even keep calling them and say, what are they going to do? What are they going to do?
Right.
It's all of us. And you have told us over and over, the fight is going to be at the ballot box. Now, they've given us enough notice to say, we're going to take away this and the water and that and everything. So now we need to put in strategies in the month of April, what we're going to do in November, and get out there and take their power away, all of us. Not just those we put in office, because they can't do it alone. We can go against and we can get the mansions out and the cinemas out, but we have to do it as a whole conglomerate of people.
Right. And for right now, I would argue, Janet, that the major work is, number one, to wake people the hell up. Forgive my language.
Yeah.
And number two, to make sure that you and everybody you know of like mind is registered to vote. And then number three, if you really want to take a next step, is to get inside the Democratic Party, volunteer, help out, do whatever you can. And also some of these great organizations like Indivisible or Our Revolution or Progressive Democrats of America. I mean, there's some great organizations out there that are great at doing great work, and we all need to get behind them. Janet, thank you. So well said. Charisse in Federal Way. Hey, Charisse, what's on your mind today?
Hi. First of all, love your show. I'm so glad I found you.
Thank you.
Secondly, I do a lot of campaign. I'm a campaign manager. I'm an ex-campaign manager for Donnell Rivers. He ran for governor here in Washington State, African American. Don Rivers has ran for everything, sir. I'm going to tell you, from the moon to the ground, he's ran for every office. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I can say about Washington State is that we do have those gatekeepers there, and they say that they want to have that change, but it's just like they're going to keep recycling politicians here. And I'm afraid for Washington State because we're at the border to the point where we're going to maybe possibly flip to a red state. Whoa. So I urge the national DNC to put money into the local races in Washington State. And I'm not saying just because they say they're the Democrat and then they turn out to be, you know, like the other two, because it's here like that. Mm-hmm. So they have to put effort here and really understand. This is my second plea. I think you had Jamie on, the president of the DNC, and I told him, I said, do not misunderstand it, sir. I know we've always been reliable, but guess what? They here.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it, Charisse. It's time to get politically active. Absolutely. Thank you so much for the call, Lori in New Kensington, Pennsylvania. Hey, Lori, what's up?
Hi. I just don't think that as a travel agent, that's what I do. You know, and this has been so confusing. I haven't had business because of the pandemic,
right?
And now people are starting to come back. But my clients like the vaccines. They like showing proof of their vaccines. You know, and
they like the mask mandates?
Sure. And now I have clients, they're afraid.
So are you getting cancellations already, Lori?
Yes.
Wow.
I'm already getting cancellations. And I have one client who's lovely, but she's not vaccinated. And as much as I don't agree with that, you know, but she's a very, very good client, very nice.
Yeah.
And she's upset. Because she wants to be able, when she goes somewhere, she makes sure she tests and she wears a mask all the time.
Oh, so she's not vaccinated because she has whatever, a concern about the vaccines or something, but she also doesn't want to get COVID.
Right.
Right. Well,
and neither does her family. Yeah. And I just don't know I don't know what we can do about it. Can we just call the president and tell him to please put this
you have
order?
If you want to reach the president, the most effective way to reach the president is to call Democratic elected officials. 202-224-3121. Call your members of Congress. You're in Pennsylvania. Call your senators, call your member of the House, and express your opinion. Yeah, I think the administration needs to appeal this thing right now. Lori, thank you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Restrain, fight back!
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy by Thom Hartmann. More information at all book outlets. Wild Alaskan Company, 100% sustainable wild-caught seafood delivered right to your door. More info at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. Cozy Earth, better sleep, better you. More info at cozyearth.com, promo code TOM. The latest views and opinions from U.S. politics and other fascinating subjects too, including cutting-edge science reports at hartmanreport.com. And Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at dinovite.com.
Our book for the Thom Hartmann Book Club today is A Nation Forged by Crisis, A New American History by Jay Sexton. And I'm reading from the introduction. This is page 9. The quest for national security and global power, America's shifting position in the international economy, and fluctuations in immigration have made the United States the nation that it is today. Americans' foreign relations have been conditioned its history not only in their cumulative effects over the long haul, but also as a result of their volatility. In periods of crisis, America's position in the world has lurched in unexpected directions. For as inexorable as the rise of the United States appears in retrospect, there have been contingent moments in which the very existence of our nation was up for grabs. This is the essence of crisis. The world turned upside down, the known replaced by the unknown, panic reigning as people struggle to maintain their balance and shifts in the very ground beneath their feet. It came with a speed and ferocity that left men dazed, New York Times correspondent Elliot Bell wrote of Wall Street's catastrophic collapse in October of 1929. Quote, the market seemed like an insensate thing that was wreaking a wild and pitiless revenge upon those who thought to master it, end quote. Crises are contagious, spreading like viruses from one realm to another. It's not without reason that the word crisis was associated with medical conditions and health scares in the 19th century. Each of the periods under consideration in this book were less a singular crisis than a set of interlinked crises. A political crisis could trigger an economic panic, which in turn could intensify social conflict, and so on. As these pandemics spread through the body politic, crisis itself was normalized, becoming an almost accepted characteristic of an age. Just as foreign crises have spread to the United States, domestic ones have spilled across its borders, unsettling foreign countries and peoples, as well as reconfiguring America's connections to the world. Consider the fateful winter of secession that followed the 1860 election of Abraham Lincoln. The crisis over slavery that divided the Union into warring sections that led to a series of sharp reversals in America's position in the global system. The foreign capital that had rushed into the roaring American economy in the preceding decades suddenly began to flee. Indeed, more capital left the United States in 1860 to 1862 than came into it. Also a once-in-a-century occurrence. One of the world's most valuable commodities and America's largest exports, Southern cotton, was confined to the ports of the Confederacy as a result of Richmond's ill-fated diplomatic strategy, leading to unemployment and social unrest in the British textile town of Lancashire. The most unexpected reversal was how the national security that the United States had attained after the war against Mexico in the 1840s was suddenly imperiled, with European powers encroaching once again upon the Western Hemisphere. Meanwhile, the Confederate emissaries across the Atlantic were in search of alliance with Britain. Our country, Secretary of State William Seward lamented in early 1861, after having expelled all European powers from the continent, now threatened to relapse into an aggravated form of its colonial experience, and like India, Turkey, China, and Italy, become the theater of transatlantic intervention and rapacity. A wider view of American history that looks beyond the nation's borders brings into focus not only the migration patterns, economic flows, and international rivalries that have connected the United States to the world, but also those rare moments in which the very existence of the nation was in question. Perhaps none was more pregnant with implications than the autumn of 1877, when the fate of the Patriots' bid for independence hung in the balance. Having proclaimed their independence to the world the previous 4th of July, their cause had stalled on the battlefield and in the diplomatic courts of the old world. I think the game is pretty near up, Washington privately confessed at year's end. To accomplish their independence is not quite so easy as to declare it, the British philosopher Jeremy Bentham haughtily remarked. But then a series of events forever changed the course of modern history. The stunning Patriot victory at the Battle of Saratoga in October, the drafting of the Articles of Confederation in November that, for all its limitations, further demonstrated the political resolve of the Americans. And most of all, the alliance signed with France in February 1778, which provided the Patriots with the resources, military assistance, and naval power that ultimately tipped the scales in their favor. There are comparable Saratoga moments in other crises in U.S. history, as we shall see. These contingent moments played out in their own distinctive ways, but are joined by a common denominator that has been curiously forgotten in our age of U.S. global power. Foreign states and people have played decisive roles in the critical moments of American history. As we make our way through our own era of global instability, in an unprecedentedly interconnected world, there's perhaps no more important lesson from the past to keep in mind. Crisis may beget crisis, Franklin Roosevelt said, as his administration transitioned from battling the Great Depression to entering the Second World War. But the progress underneath does not wholly halt. It does go forward, end quote. Like so many of Roosevelt's public statements, this one reveals a truth even as it conceals others. The United States came out on the other side of its greatest crises as a stronger and more efficiently organized nation, as Roosevelt suggested. The process of mobilizing resources to counter threats catalyzed innovations in political economy, such as the creation of a national financial system during the Civil War, and the economic reforms of the New Deal. The book is A Nation Forged by Crisis by Jay Sexton. That was wiped out by Reaganomics.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the second hour of our program. On the line with us is Dr. Sylvia A. Earle, president and chairman of Mission Blue, or the National Geographic Explorer at Large, former chief scientist with NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and the author of a new book, National Geographic Ocean, A Global Odyssey. The website is mission-blue.org, and you can follow Dr. Earle on Twitter at Sylvia Earle, E-A-R-L-E, or at Mission Blue. Dr. Earle, welcome to the program. What is the state of our oceans right now? Where are they at relative to where they were, say, 100 or 200 years ago?
Well, there's good news and there's bad news. For sure, we know more than we did 100 years ago, or 50, or even 10 years ago. The rate of exploration, of understanding the ocean, of being able to connect the dots, if you will, with the computer technologies that now take this massive amount of new information and make it more widely available. And we have the technology to explore that didn't exist 100 years ago. Technology high in the sky, technology deep in the sea. So although we, I think, now understand the magnitude of our ignorance in a way that we didn't 100 years ago, we really understand that the ocean is in trouble. We can see that we could not see before how climate and ocean are inextricably linked. Without the ocean, there would basically be no climate. It would be rocks and water, or rocks and a little bit of water, but the ocean is where 97% of Earth's water is, and it's not just water and rocks. It's alive, and it's the living ocean that generates oxygen, captures carbon, drives the great cycles of life that shape planetary chemistry in our favor. No ocean, no life, no humans without the ocean. Now we know that. We did not.
One of the major ocean systems that affects our weather, and by our I mean literally the entire planets, is sometimes referred to as the Great Conveyor Belt, the AMORC, if I'm remembering the acronym right. I don't remember what it stands for. But, you know, this system that brings warm water from the South Pacific Ocean around the southern tip of Africa up along the eastern coast of South America, Central America, the United States, and then out to just off the coast of England, where, you know, it meets the cold water and settles. And there's concern that the increasing freshwater melt from Greenland in particular is interfering with the ability of that system to operate, and that if it fails, that the consequences could be catastrophic, at least for human civilization. Where is our understanding of that at, and how is that system doing these days?
The whole concept of understanding the cold currents driven by the melt of polar ice, sinking the more dense, heavier cold water, and moving beneath the surface waters, upwelling in various places, driven by the rotation of the Earth, driven by the winds, driven by differences in the density caused by freshwater and saltwater. Anyway, it took until pretty far along in the 20th century to get enough information together and to get instruments in the deep sea that could measure and document the flow of deep sea currents. And the picture is far from perfect, but we know enough to know, as you have described it, the great ocean conveyor belt of cold and warm currents that shape the climate in ways that right now favor us. But if you nudge that system even a little bit, you alter the whole character of places where people dwell.
Particularly Europe.
Well, if the Gulf Stream changes direction, and it has in times past, really driven by natural causes, this one is something where we have our signature on the changes.
Are any sign that those changes in thermohaline circulation are going to bite us here in, within recent, or not recent, immediate memory, in time, 10, 20, 30, 50 years?
Well, the evidence is clear that circulation is changing, and we need to be prepared to adapt, not just for the changing currents and the impact that will have on temperature in Europe and elsewhere. But the thing is, now we can see, as we couldn't before, how everything connects. We once thought, when I was a young scientist, the phenomenon off the coast of Peru called El Nino was localized. It's only as we gathered increasing information that this cyclical changes of the currents along the west coast of South America has global impact.
Right.
It influences drought and flooding, the difference between El Nino and La Nina, all driven by shifts in ocean currents. And that seems like just a physical phenomenon, but we're now at a stage where the physicists and the chemists and the biologists are really mixing it up and understanding that this is a living planet, that the carbon cycle, for example, is driven, well, it's physics and chemistry, but it's the chemistry of life. So we understand that photosynthesis requires a little bit of carbon dioxide to power photosynthesis. Carbon dioxide plus water yields oxygen and sugar, food, that then goes through the whole food chain of carbohydrates and fats and proteins. Nitrogen is involved with proteins, phosphorus, this whole chemistry of life. But until right about now, being able to synthesize the chemistry, the physics, the biology into understanding more about how the living planet functions and what we have done to the nature of nature, clear-cutting forests, converting the wild places throughout most of the continents, Antarctica accepted. And now understanding we've done it to the ocean too. We've clear-cut the ocean.
Right.
90% of many of the big fish are gone. And you think, okay, trees are carbon-based units. They hold the carbon. They sequester carbon in the soil. And when you burn a forest, that carbon is released. When you clear cut a forest, that carbon is released. When you clear cut the ocean, you take out hundreds of millions of tons of krill, of sharks, of tunas, of swordfish, of all the creatures that we call seafood and sea products. We grind up fish for fertilizer. We capture the small fish by the millions of tons, grind it up, and we feed it to chickens and cows and pigs. We don't even think about that as what we've taken from the sea. But when it gets mushed up, who would recognize that we're talking about gazillions of little fish?
I get it. We're closing in on a break here. The last question I was very curious to get your take on. We're learning that microplastics in our environment are a danger, that many of these plastics contain and release over periods of time, in particular hormone-bending chemicals and other chemicals that can cause cancers and things. And there can be as many as 90,000 microplastic particles in a single bottle of bottled water. People are starting to get a little nervous about that kind of stuff. But I understand that one of the major sources of microplastics in our food chain is from fish, and that the fish are getting them because the oceans are filled with microplastics. What is the status of our oceans relative to plastics in general and microplastics specifically?
Well, 100 years ago, it wasn't a problem because these synthetic materials did not exist.
Right.
On one hand, they serve us well, and for medical, for scientific, for everyday uses, packaging. But now that we know the nature of the problem, we really have to do a concerted effort to try to extract what we can of what's already been put in the ocean and do our utmost not to let more escape and to think about different ways to package, different ways to substitute for these synthetic materials that really don't go away. They're around for not just decades or centuries, but for thousands of years. And once they're in the ocean, they're hard to pull back when they get down to these tiny little pieces, and not just micro, but nanoplastics that are tiny enough to appear in our bloodstream. They're in the air, the beer or the water or the soda that you drink. They're there, and it's a fact.
Yeah.
But at least knowing that we've got a problem helps.
Yeah, it seems like a starting point. Dr. Sylvia Earle, the new book is The National Geographic Ocean, A Global Odyssey. Mission-blue.org is the website. Sylvia Earle with an E at the end on Twitter and Mission Blue on Twitter. Dr. Earle, thank you so much for the great work you're doing and for dropping by to talk with us.
Oh, it's great to be part of the action.
Thank you. Thank you. Back at you. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Up next, let's continue our conversation about authoritarianism, about crazed Trump judges and airplane mask mandates, and Rick Scott's new plan. I got to tell you about that. And welcome back. And Linda in Auburn, Washington. Hey, Linda, thanks for listening to KBCS. What's on your mind today?
Hi, I just wanted to call in to talk about the masks on the planes, the concern about not having those, and three, solutions or points related to that.
Mm-hmm.
And the first point is, if the people will call the airplane company, if whether or not they're going to fly, but and just especially if they're going to fly, tell them what their preference is. And the company wants to please the customers, so they really might be able to get a whole flight of people who want masks and a whole flight of people who don't. And so that's one step, one thing to do. Another thing to do is once you get to the airport, talk to the people at the airline desk, and right before you go on the plane at that desk and also on the plane, the stewards and stewardesses, and say what your issue is. If you have an immune issue, or if you just want peace of mind to have everybody wear a mask, if they announce to everybody that there's a passenger that has a concern, a whole lot of people will just put a mask on. And then we need to look at the ones that don't want to be considerate. Like you're talking about the plastics and stuff. Who knows? Maybe people are getting toxic, and that's affecting their attitude. So we need to start looking when people are not considerate. Then the third thing is you're mentioning about the judge, and I just want to bring up that the founders, when they looked at the judges, they knew the Bible and the early settlers, so they probably originally wanted judges that would align with what they thought God would want. So we can't say that just because the lawyer society doesn't think she's qualified. We need to think, has she read the Bible? What does she think? Is she going to make decisions based on what she thinks a higher, non-corruptible being that loves all humans would decide?
Yeah, the problem is the Bible is so ambiguous in so many ways that people interpret it and then use those interpretations to advance their own interests.
Can I say a little something related to that?
You may.
We need to say that we're going by the Law 2.0 in the New Testament, because that relates to love God, love one another.
Right. And there's no mention of homosexuality in the New Testament, or of abortion, which is actually mentioned in the Old Testament in several places where God causes abortions. But neither are mentioned in the New Testament, and yet these people who are out here trying to change the law and get these judges elected are using those two things and pointing to the Bible. It makes no sense, Linda.
Well, you don't only look at the New Testament. You can look at in Jeremiah.
See, this is the excuse. Now let's go find a verse that supports our point of view and quote it. And that's why I'm opposed to judges who say that they're citing the Bible as authority. The Bible is one of, one religion among many, and it's one sacred text among many. And to say that this sacred text I'm going to interpret in the way that I think. I'd love to say, okay, everything has to comport with the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 25, but I know that that's a silly argument because there's so many things that contradict that. Linda, thank you for the call. I wasn't expecting, nor do I enjoy debating religion with people, frankly, but I'll leave it at that. We'll be right back. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Rick Scott's 11-point plan is so insane, it's basically a gift to Democrats. I think this is true, and I think Democrats need to be pushing this like crazy. Rick Scott's 11-point plan. This is the senator who is in charge of the Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee, the RSCC. He's the head of the organization that raises money for and to get reelected Republican members of the United States Senate, who can then obstruct anything that Democrats want to do to help average Americans and can promote the traditional Republican agenda of dancing to the tune of the billionaires and the big corporations. So what is Rick Scott's 11-point plan? Well, number one, he wants to turn schools into patriotism factories. Yes, you must say the Pledge of Allegiance, and you must say that God part in there. He wants to close the Department of Education. He wants to put into place a voucher program that ghettoizes public schools and finally, ultimately, probably kills public schools, and routes billions of tax dollars to unregulated religious so-called educational institutions, number one. Number two, he wants to cut off any funding for universities or schools or any sort of organization that takes money from the government that has diversity training. Oh my God, people might learn how to be sensitive about people who aren't like them. Number three, he wants to impose more draconian sentences for nonviolent crime and expand qualified immunity for cops so that they can, kill more people and get away with it and beat people up and stuff like that. Yeah, qualified immunity, isn't that cool? Give people a gun, give them a stick, and tell them there's no consequences. That's the second point of his plan. The third, the president should have a line item veto, which, by the way, is unconstitutional and would render Congress irrelevant. He wants to prohibit debt ceiling increases. Brilliant. In other words, the government can do nothing if we have a recession. He wants to tax poor and retired people. He wants to tax your Social Security income no matter how low it is. And he says socialism will be treated as a foreign combatant. Does that mean that anybody who advocates for Social Security and Medicare gets put in Guantanamo? I don't know, but it kind of seems that way. He wants to put into place term limits for members of Congress. Oh, brilliant. So we're going to double the power of the lobbyists, the only permanent power in Washington, D.C. He wants to ban abortion and ban porn. I'm not sure there's a relationship between the two. Maybe there is in Rick Scott's twisted mind. And he wants to give tax breaks to nuclear families, in other words, man, woman, children, and allow faith-based groups to discriminate against families that are not basically straight families. He wants doctors to be banned from treating trans people. And he wants to ban trans women from sports. He wants to ban Facebook and Twitter from banning users for hate speech or spreading lies, which, by the way, I think is a violation of the First Amendment that he's advocating. He wants to stop investing federal retirement dollars with, quote, woke fund managers. In other words, he wants to stop the federal government from investing money in, or any state agency, and most states do invest their money, their pension funds and things like that. He wants to ban them from investing in funds that refuse to, for example, invest in fossil fuel companies. How dare they? That's woke. And he says he wants to take climate change seriously but not hysterically. In other words, do nothing about it. Give it some lip service. I mean, this is one of his opening paragraphs. The militant left now controls the entire federal government, the news media, academia, Hollywood, and most corporate boardrooms. But they want more. They are redefining America and silencing their opponents. Which, leads Jeffrey Billman, who wrote this great piece for Orlando Weekly, to say, how much LSD does a man have to take to think of Joe Biden as the militant left? Really? I mean, come on. Scott's version, he says, of a white Christian America idealizes capitalists and idealizes people who espouse racist, misogynistic, and bigoted worldviews. This is the Republican Party's platform going into this November election, and Democrats need to be talking about it every single day. Rick Scott wants every federal program to sunset after 5 years unless Congress specifically acts otherwise. No more Social Security when Republicans are in charge. It will just go away. It will end. No more Medicare if Republicans can seize control of Congress and get the White House. It will go away. It will end. No more Medicaid, no more food stamps, no more, basically, federal aid to education. All the education department itself goes away. And Rick Scott wants to increase taxes on the bottom 60% of Americans so that we all have skin in the game, don't you know? We need to be talking about this a lot. This is the new Republican platform.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
In fact, it's actually the only Republican platform. There is literally no other Republican platform out there other than whatever Donald Trump wants, that's what we want. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Unsettling Truths, the ongoing dehumanizing legacy of the doctrine of discovery by Mark Charles and Soon Chan Ra. This is from chapter 1. You cannot discover lands that are already inhabited. I, Mark, said this almost under my breath as I walked past a line of men dressed as Spanish sailors from the 1490s. I was in front of Union Station in Washington, D.C., near the massive statue of Christopher Columbus overlooking the United States Capitol. Every Columbus Day, there's an official ceremony in this plaza honoring Columbus as the discoverer of America. I had stumbled upon this ceremony by accident the year prior. There were a few non-natives holding signs and protesting the ceremony, but nothing very disruptive. I went back the following year primarily out of curiosity. I wasn't intending to protest, nor did I want to make a scene. As I walked up behind the statue and approached the group of men dressed as Spanish sailors, the words just came out of my mouth. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. As I walked further down the line, I said it again, this time a little louder. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. As I continued walking, I came to the front of the line where a group of men dressed in suits were standing. I repeated myself, making sure they could hear me. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. Suck it up, was the reply I heard as I kept walking. By this time, I'd walked around the statue and reached the front where a small stage had been erected and chairs set up for people to watch the ceremony. It hadn't started yet, but more than half the audience was seated waiting for it to begin. So I stopped near the center, turned toward the crowd, and in a calm but loud voice, I said to the people, you cannot discover lands already inhabited. That process is known as stealing, conquering, or colonizing. The fact that America calls what Columbus did discovery reveals the implicit racial bias of the country, that Native Americans are not fully human. Quickly, one of the white men dressed in a suit walked over and interrupted me. You are not welcome here, he said as he grabbed my arm and began walking me away. I attempted to explain the inappropriateness of both celebrating this holiday as well as hosting this ceremony, but instead of engaging in conversation, he threatened me with arrest and escorted me from the area. As I walked away from the gathering, I was amused at his words and the irony of their context. A white man participating in a public ceremony honoring Christopher Columbus as the discoverer of America, telling a native man he was not welcome in that space. How did a flawed assumption about the place of the indigenous population in U.S. society become normative? How are assumptions so deeply ingrained in the American psyche and imagination that
dysfunctional and oppressive actions emerge? How did a dysfunctional idea and worldview form that allows for the displacement of native bodies? One of the explanations for the formation of this dysfunctional worldview is the doctrine of discovery. The doctrine of discovery is a set of legal principles that govern the European colonizing powers, particularly during the administration of indigenous land, regarding the administration. It is the primary legal precedent that still controls native affairs and rights, and international law formulated in the 15th and 16th centuries. From a theological perspective, the legal and political role of the doctrine of discovery is rooted in a dysfunctional theological imagination that shaped the European colonial settler worldview. The doctrine emerged from a series of 15th century papal bulls, which are official decrees by the Pope that carry the full weight of his ecclesiastical office. On June 18, 1452, Pope Nicholas V issued the papal bull Dum Diversus, which initiated the first set of documents that would compose the doctrine of discovery. The official decree of the Pope granted permission to King Alfonso V of Portugal, quote, to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens, Muslims, and pagans whatsoever, and other enemies of Christ wheresoever placed, and the kingdoms, dukedoms, principalities, dominions, possessions, and all movable and immovable goods whatsoever, held and possessed by them, and to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, and to apply and appropriate to himself and his successors the kingdoms, dukedoms, counties, principalities, dominions, possessions, and goods, and to convert them to his or their use and profit. End of quote from Pope Nicholas's papal bull of 1452. Dum Diversus would identify the Saracens, a common term for Muslims at the time, and pagans, essentially identifying any non-Christians as others, as those who could be targeted for, quote, perpetual slavery. The papal bull intentionally used language that identified those outside the European Christian world and enforced the Western theological imagination of non-Europeans as other. The Portuguese took these ecclesiastical statements to heart and perpetrated the slave trade from the African continent to the European and the American continents. As a Christian ruler, the King of Portugal would have power endowed from the church to take possession of the other as slave labor from the continent of Africa. The pagan African body was just another commodity to be taken for the pleasure and profit of the European Christian body, the one made most fully in the image of God. In the January of 1454, Pope Nicholas authored another bull. The book is Unsettling Truths by Charles and Ra. Our 1 hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3 hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. 34 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. By the way, I should point out that this judge who ended the mask mandate on the airlines, her one claim to fame in her career is that she was a clerk for Clarence Thomas. That kind of tells you everything. Paul in Lisbon, Connecticut. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I worked with Brett Kavanaugh in 1984 in New Haven, Connecticut when he was a sophomore in college, yeah.
When he was what?
When he was a sophomore.
A sophomore in college?
Yeah, Yale.
Uh-huh. Tell me about it.
And what happened was, this is what he told us. Well, what was going on, there was a food service strike from the union workers at Yale, and he wasn't able to cross the picket line to practice. So Yale bought him a laborer's book to keep him out of trouble because he said they were after him. And
wait a minute. What does it mean that Yale bought him a laborer's book, and what was he trying to practice that he couldn't cross the picket line for?
He was a third-string quarterback on the Yale football team.
Ah, okay. And he couldn't cross the picket line because I don't know. They wouldn't let him cross the picket line, so
they had the summer off from practicing.
Right.
This was the summer.
Oh, so the team kind of made that decision.
Yeah, because what happened was, it was only practice anyway.
Right.
It wasn't the season.
Yeah, I get that.
And they were at the other field house, not the big field house, a little field house. But these guys were picketing everywhere. So long story short, he used to wear his jersey in, and I told him, you ain't no Joe Montana, buddy. Mm-hmm. And he just stood there, and then he staggered off. This guy was drunk every single day on the job. And the boss was wondering where he got the booze from.
Really? Hang on just a second. What was the job?
Oh, we were pipelines. I'm a pipeliner, and we were installing gas mains.
And he was
New Haven.
And he was doing that, what, as a part-time job?
No, it was a full-time job during the summer.
During the summer.
Got a book.
Okay.
Yeah, he got a book out of the laborers local that Yale bought him. And, I'll tell you what, people will kill for a laborers local book, because even at that time they were making $16 an hour.
Oh, by book you meant they booked him into a job. They got him a job laying pipeline with you, Paul, in Connecticut during the summer while he was going to college, because he couldn't practice football because of the strike, and he was drunk every day on the job. Is that the bottom line of what you're saying?
Yes, and what he told us was that they bought him this book because he was getting in trouble at school. Wow. And the New Haven, and the boss asked him, why are you hiding in the truck all day? And he said, well, the New Haven police are after me for rape, but I didn't do it, he said.
Really?
So, yeah. So here's the scenario was, Yale knew he was no good. And because he comes from, a rich family, they got him this book to keep him out of trouble.
Got him this job, yeah.
The Yale police knew who he was, but were told to back off. But the New Haven police were after him. So he would hide out in the truck all day and not do anything, basically. And he only made it 3 weeks. He got laid off for, believe it or not for drinking. Because I said, why don't you fire him for drinking? And the boss said, well, I'd have to fire the whole crew, because back then we all drank beer and stuff. So, But he got laid off for lost time. He was missing days, too many days.
Because he was drinking so much. That's amazing. Okay, Garrett, Paul, thanks for the story. I can't vet this story. I don't know Paul, but I'm trusting you, Paul.
Let me tell you what. It can be vetted. I wrote a 2-page letter to the FBI before he got certified, and I never heard a word from him. And I also wrote a letter to White House, not the White House, but what is he, Senator Whitehouse?
Sheldon, Senator Sheldon, yeah.
And I never heard a thing back from anybody.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, Paul, thank you. Thank you for the information. That's amazing. Lewis in Norristown, Pennsylvania. Hey, Lewis, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. So I had an idea to kind of lower the influence of the Trump cult, or the influence that Trump has on his cult. Mm-hmm. And this is basically just trying to get a hold of as much people that have left the cult as possible, mm-hmm. and then interview them on the show, like maybe others too, like other people on the left that have shows they can do this, and create the illusion that, that there's just this mass exodus of people leaving the Trump cult. And the is to get people in the cult to sort of be like, oh, there's a lot of people leaving the cult. There must be something to this.
That's a great suggestion, Lewis. Let me just say right now to anybody who's listening, and I know that there are conservatives listening to this program. They call in from time to time. Generally, they're a little timid, but you will be treated nicely. But if you have left the Trump cult, our number is 202-808-9925. And and you can find all the information, the contact information at our website, thomhartmann.com. Right at the moment, every single line is occupied, but typically there are times, particularly the last half hour of the show, when there's usually a few empty lines, and it's fairly easy to get through. So we would love to hear from you if you are a refugee from the Trump cult. Did I do it right, Louis?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay. All right. Let's see if anybody calls. I think we should be doing it. Thank you very much. Lisa in Newark, Delaware. Hey, Lisa, what's on your mind?
I love that guy's idea.
Yeah, me too.
Okay? So I hope he calls back because I got a question for everyone. I'm reading the book Strongmen, and one of the things that all these fascists have in common.
Ruth Ben-Ghiat's book, Strongmen?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. I don't think it helps me sleep at night, but
yeah, I get
one
it.
thing all these fascists and dictators and despots have in common is they control messaging. We have let the crazy right completely hijack the flag, control messaging. They have symbols like brown coats versus red hats. We need symbols. We need messaging. And I don't know what the Democratic Party is doing. Are they going to wait and come out with this right before the midterms?
Well, hang on just a second, Lisa. Here's what's happened. Donald Trump understands branding. I mean, of all the things in life in the world that Donald Trump understands, probably how to abuse women and how to brand yourself are right at the top of the list. And so he took his brand and labeled it MAGA and logoized it with a red hat, the red cap, and turned it into a brand that subsumed, that ate alive the Republican Party brand, because the Republican Party brand up until that point had been kind of amorphous as well. The Democratic Party, if it was to brand itself, has to decide who it is first, right? The Trump brand that is
democracy.
Well, I think that's a start, but I don't think that that's the kind of thing that you know, puts fire in people's bellies. And the progressives have that, you know, the Progressive Caucus. And I would advise the Progressive Caucus to do some serious, you know, to have a serious conversation with somebody like me or anybody who has experience, you know, running and owning advertising agencies, teaching branding, doing branding. I wrote a book about it called Cracking the Code back in 2010 for that election. The progressives need to brand themselves. And so that when you say a single word, when you talk about a single color, when you talk about, you know, like red states, you know, they should adopt blue, of course, I think. I mean, you know, why not? It's there. They should come up with a slogan, a very, very simple slogan that has an acronym associated with it. That should become a logo. They should logoize the brand and you know, follow the rules of a good logo. A good logo can shrink down small enough to be recognized on a business card and can blow up large enough to you know, fill a billboard. I mean, this is kind of branding 101. But the Democratic Party, the problem is right now with the party trying to brand itself outside of branding itself as Joe Biden's party, which is what they're doing by and large, which is not a bad thing. But, you know, it's also got a downside to it. Joe Biden couldn't get the Build Back Better push through Congress. And so that makes it look like a weak brand, and it's really hurting. But but eventually, I think what you will see is if the progressives could brand themselves the way that the Trump faction within the GOP branded itself, they could do what the Trump faction did, which is essentially take over the party.
And I think one of the problems Dems have is we're always looking for some savior to bring the message. We need to be the message.
Yeah.
We can't wait for another Obama. That was once in a lifetime.
Yeah.
But it's like, look at the message with the Ukraine and the sunflowers and the flag. But it's more than that. It's not just a symbol. They're committed to democracy and freedom in a way we don't see in this country because we let Putin get in here with disinformation. And I bet John McCain's rolling in his grave.
Oh yeah, and you've got an entire Republican Party, a large chunk of it that is just buying into that stuff. Lisa, thank you for the call. Pam in Valdosta says you disagree with me, Pam. So you go to the front of the line. What do you disagree about?
Oh my God. I mean, I've never heard your show in my life. I just turned it on this first time in my life. Mm-hmm. I mean, you people are not like with it. I mean, do you not see our country going to hell right now in front of you?
How so?
I just paid $5.08 a gallon for diesel in Tennessee yesterday.
Oh yeah, it's just about as bad as when George Bush was president, isn't it?
Well, I don't care about George Bush. He's just like the Democrat Party. They're all globalists. They don't like America. They're just there to get rich.
So let me get this straight, Pam. You're upset because Saudi Arabia has refused to increase oil production and the price of oil is too high.
No,
and you're blaming that on Joe Biden.
That's not what happened. That's not what happened. Look at Joe Biden. He can't even walk and talk.
Donald Trump is bragging about the fact that he got Saudi Arabia. This was one of his signal achievements. Was when the price of oil was $30 a barrel. Donald Trump, sent Jared over to Saudi Arabia. Jared is talking about this in his investment company's, latest pitch online. They've leaked the video. That he went over to Saudi Arabia and got them to cut oil production by 2 or 3 million barrels a day, which drove the price of oil back up. And they have not gone back to the old production that they had when, during the pandemic when there was little demand. And as a consequence of that, we've got high oil prices. This was brought to you, Pam, by Jared Kushner and Donald Trump.
Okay. So why doesn't Joe Biden be a good president and look out for his people?
He's trying to. He came out and publicly asked the Saudis to increase production. He has reached out to them 3 different times in public. And what we're hearing is that ever since Jared Kushner went over there and got $2 billion from them, that the Saudis have been telling Joe Biden to go pound sand, that this is going to work well for the Republicans because they can blame Joe Biden and the Democrats for the price of oil and thus the price of gasoline. And the Saudis have thrown in with the Republicans who are hell-bent on destroying America and turning us into Russia, Pam.
Turning us into Russia? Yep. That would be the people making you wear masks and telling you what to do with your life.
No, in Russia, they're not making you wear a mask.
No.
No, they have one of the highest death rates in COVID in the world.
Listen, the mask doesn't work, or Nancy Pelosi wouldn't have got COVID, don't you think?
I think that masks do work. I think that if the reason why surgeons have worn masks since the 1870s is because they stopped the spread of disease.
Surgeon. It's to protect the patient from getting something from him.
That's correct.
They got open wounds.
That's correct.
That's what that's for.
That's correct, and that's why if you're sick, you should wear a mask.
No, it doesn't help. It doesn't help.
Yeah. Pam, I'm sorry we're out of time. You need to call back another time when I've got when I'm not up against a hard break here. I'd love to have a conversation with you. You're welcome anytime to call the program. It is 48 minutes. It's very, very rare that conservatives have the courage to actually call up and say what they think. It's kind of sad, but it's rare. Look forward to hearing from you, Pam. We'll be right back. It's 48 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Is Pam right? Is the country going to hell in a handbasket? And if so, is it Joe Biden's fault? What do you think? Willow in Mahalan, Oregon. Hey, Willow. Thanks for watching Free Speech. What's on your mind today?
I had to follow Pam.
I'm sorry. That's how it works.
No, it kind of proves my point. First off, Tom, I love you and your team. Thank you for everything you do. But I just wanted to share a story. We had recently celebrated my nephew's first birthday out here on the coast. There was about 11 of us. We got together. We're all vaccinated, boosted. We played our part to be safe leading up to this gathering. We had our weekend together, separate hotels and places we live. I live out here. Anyways, we interacted with each other throughout the weekend and had the 1-year-old's birthday party. Well, one of my friends traveled for work recently to Austin, Texas. Flew on a plane. He came back, got his 4th booster because he has type 1 diabetes. Well, anyways, he tested twice for COVID, 2 antigen tests at home before he came and gathered with our group. Well, he came home on Sunday and got a positive antigen test.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so unfortunately, there's 11 of us all together. He gave it to 6 of us in that group, including myself. So I guess my point is it's still out there. It's real. I'm still suffering from it. I had to miss an entire week worth of work. My friend had to miss an entire week worth of work. Our group is midwives and doctors and as well as physical therapist. I'm a servant of the state. I just want to put an exclamation mark that
it's still out there.
And
so I'm assuming.
And also,
I'm sorry, Willow.
I'm sorry.
Finish your thought.
No, it's just not only is it now that we all unfortunately gave it to the majority of our group, it's a complete inconvenience to everybody having to reschedule all their time. I've had to be isolated in my room with the N95 anytime I leave my room, so I don't infect the rest of my family. It completely disrupts everybody else's schedule. And the unfortunate side of it, one last point, is that it's when I let other people know, the mentality is, it's at least it's not that bad anymore. It's kind of like, a bad cold or allergy symptoms. No, I had a fever of 103 for 3 days. I was sick. So is multiple of my friends. Not only did my 1-year-old nephew get it, but my friend's 8-year-old son, got it. With a group of us, 6 out of that 11. Wow. So it's contagious. It's real, and I just wanted to put that.
And you're vaxxed and boosted, and you still had 103-degree fever for 3 days?
Yes, sir. Team Moderna, 2 vaxxed and a booster, and yep.
And what I don't think I've ever had 103-degree fever in my life. I remember 101 and 102-degree fevers with the flu, and I felt like I was going to die. I mean, what's 103-degree fever like?
It's terrible. I sweated through all my clothes, all my sheets. I mean, I had to basically, I couldn't leave my bed for 3 days, just lots of fluids. It's terrible. The chills, you're just cold, but you're sweating. It was absolutely miserable. And I still have really severe fatigue and coughing fits. Oh my. It's just, we are all a relatively young group of people as well, healthy, active. Yeah. I'm vegetarian. I don't know. It's contagious, and I just wanted
Willow, thank you.
Story, so.
Thank you for your testimony. I want to testify. Thank you for your testimony. It's great to hear from you. I wish you well, and I hope you recover fully. I got to run. Thank you, Willow. Wow, 52 minutes past the hour. Hey, I've got a new book out. It's called The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy. Available wherever you find fine books. The American Lung Association just came out with an amazing new study where they took Joe Biden's goal of a zero-emission power grid by 2035 and zero-emission passenger vehicles across the United States by 2035, which is a ways down the road, and trucks and buses being zero emission by 2040, and said, okay, what will happen if we do this? They discovered that over 100,000 lives would be saved, people who wouldn't be getting cancer and COPD and asthma and all these kind of things. Over $1.2 trillion in public health costs would be avoided, and just massive, and 2.8 million fewer asthma attacks, among other public health problems. They note how extraordinary this would be, what a huge and positive impact it would have on America's public health, and how it's completely doable. The American Lung Association. The one note they say is that, quote, opposition from Republicans and 2 key Democratic senators makes it easier said than done. You can check it out at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. 54 minutes past the hour, and picking up on your phone calls here. Mike in Lomita, California. Hey, Mike, you have thoughts on how to fly safely and not get COVID?
Hey, Tom. Yeah, and I was prompted by the call from Pat, the caller who's in Hawaii and is returning home to resume some cancer treatment. And while I don't know the specifics of what sorts of masks she's using, there are certain ways to maximize the effect. Generally, there's a nose wire, and that should be fitted or refitted.
Right,
so
bend it down so it fits around your nose safely, yeah.
Right. The mask should be pouched in, drawn in when you inhale from the sides, so that the air is coming in through the filtration.
Yep.
Right. And it doesn't hurt to double mask. It increases the efficacy. I don't have the stat at my fingertips, but it would seem to be increasing your chances for avoiding contamination. And And that judge you quoted, I think she must have got her biology instruction from Tucker Carlson, because she's talking about the mandate for sanitation in the CDC's legislation. Well, you know, in pulmonary medicine, there's a term called the pulmonary toilet. And I don't think it's very sanitary to be breathing in somebody else's effluent from their pulmonary toilet. So I don't know quite how she's...
Meaning your breath, right?
Well...
Because your breath, your body expels toxic material not just through urine and feces, but also through your breath and sweat.
Right.
I mean, these are all excretory organs.
Yeah, not the gases so much as the little wet particles that carry viruses and, in some cases, bacteria. So that, you know, it seems a very off-the-wall sort of thing. I heard you reading that. And
yeah, this is what she's saying, is that the CDC's power is to require people to use bleach to disinfect surfaces, but not to wear masks. Basically, that's what she said.
That is not only bad science, it's bad language.
Yeah.
But in any event, remember there used to be a time when people were allowed to smoke on airliners, and they had smoking and non-smoking sections. Why couldn't the airlines have masked and unmasked sections on these flights?
Oh, that's an idea. That's a real interesting one. I doubt it'll catch on, but even during flu season, that would be an idea. Mike, I mean, like I said, you know, you travel in Asia, and I've done this extensively. I have lived in Asia, and people wear masks during flu season, just as a matter of common courtesy.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Restrain, fight back!
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy by Thom Hartmann. More information at all book outlets. Wild Alaskan Company, 100% sustainable wild-caught seafood delivered right to your door. More info at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. Cozy Earth, better sleep, better you. More info at cozyearth.com, promo code TOM. The latest views and opinions from U.S. politics and other fascinating subjects too, including cutting-edge science reports at hartmanreport.com. And Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at dinovite.com.
For the Thom Hartmann University Book Club today, we're reading Locked Down, Locked Out, Why Prison Doesn't Work and How We Can Do Better by Maya Chenwar, who is, or was, I believe she still is, the publisher, or the editor, rather, over at truthout.org. This is from the introduction, the very beginning of the book. She uses a word I can't say on the air. I'll replace it with the word damn. Damn, 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 damn. I'm crying with my mother over the phone. It's late evening, December 25th, 2012, and Kayla, my only sister and best friend, has been arrested for the 7th time in the past 6 years. She's in jail again, and this time we're sort of hoping she'll stay there. If she asks, I tell Mom, I'm not bailing her out. Well, you know, we're not, Mom says, her voice low and far away, a weary echo of words uttered in months and years past. If she's in there, at least she'll be safe.
jail, we agree, may be the only place that can save Kayla's life, staving off her burning dependency on heroin. Neither of us acknowledges that regardless of whether Kayla stays clean while incarcerated, sooner or later she'll be getting out. Do we know what she's in for, I asked Mom. Does it matter? I think of Kayla cuffed and listless, being dragged through the doors of the Cook County Jail, catching the eyes of women she's known before in court, on the street, in juvenile detention, in jail, in prison. I wonder whether a part of her is relieved to be back. Later, when I pick up the phone and hear a robotic voice announce, "You have a collect call from the Cook County Jail, press 5 to take the call," I press the hang-up button and get into bed. My attitude toward Kayla's incarceration was born out of desperation. She'd overdosed 3 times within 2 months, passing out on the street, awakening in abandoned buildings or crowded hospitals, her pulse barely ticking. Yet my wish chafed against not only my love for her, but also my politics, my ideals, my sense of justice and truth. After all, I run a social justice-based news organization and have denounced the colossus that is the prison industrial complex for as long as I can remember. For nearly a decade, I've corresponded with a number of people in prison as both interviewees and pen pals, and I've learned much from them about the violence and hopelessness of our system. My understandings of the power structures that create prisons have been guided by the work of people like activist and scholar Angela Davis, a staunch prison abolitionist. How could I reconcile my wholehearted opposition to the prison industrial complex with a desire to see my own sister locked up? When I look back on that time, I can only comprehend it by acknowledging the insidious, persistent role that prison occupied in my mind. It was closely connected to the role it occupies in larger society. Incarceration serves as the default answer to many of the worst social problems plaguing this country. Not because it solves them, but because it buries them. By isolating and disappearing millions of Americans, more than 2.3 million right now, making us the most incarcerated country on the planet, prison conveniently disappears deeply rooted issues that society, or rather those with power in society, would rather not attend to. Prison, writes Angela Davis, performs a feat of magic. As massive numbers of homeless, hungry, unemployed, drug-addicted, illiterate, and mentally ill people vanish behind its walls, the social problems of extreme poverty, homelessness, hunger, unemployment, drug addiction, illiteracy, and mental illness become more ignorable, too. But, as Davis notes, prisons do not disappear problems, they disappear human beings. And the caging and erasure of those human beings, mostly people of color and poor people, perpetuates a cycle in which large groups of people are cut off from mainstream society and denied the freedoms, opportunities, civil dignity, and basic needs that allow them a good life. In many jails and prisons, incarcerated people are tossed into a dank, dungeon-like solitary confinement cell when they are determined to have misbehaved. It's dubbed the hole. Isolated and dark, it shuts out almost all communication with fellow prisoners in the outside. Guards control the terms of confinement and the channels, if any, by which words can travel in and out. The hole presents a stark symbol of the institution of prison in its entirety, which functions on the tenets of disappearance, isolationism, and disposability. The solution to our social problems, the mechanism that's supposed to keep things together, amounts to destruction. The disposal of vast numbers of human beings, the breaking down of families, and the shattering of communities. Prison is tearing society apart. This country's most marginalized communities bear the overwhelming brunt of that devastation, but ultimately we are all caught up in the destruction as the politics of isolation ruptures the human bonds that could otherwise hold together a safer, healthier, and more just society. The behemoth that encompasses the prison is called by many names. The most meaningful ones, I think, are those that convey the pervasiveness of its power, the way it infects the world outside as well as the people within. Scholar and activist Beth Ritchie uses the term prison nation, describing it as, quote, a broad notion of using the arm of the law to control people, especially people who are disadvantaged and come from disadvantaged communities, end quote. That control can take the form of prisons, jails, surveillance, policing, detention, probation, harsh restrictions on child guardianship, the militarization of schools, and other strategies of isolation and disposal, particularly deployed against poor communities of color, especially black communities. Others have used prison nation simply to demonstrate the system's vastness, how it infiltrates our culture and fuels our national politics, often in invisible ways. Prison industrial complex, PIC, is another key term. Rachel Herzing of the prison abolitionist group Critical Resistance defines it, and then she goes on through this. It's an extraordinary book. locked down, locked out by Maya Shin. Book is Threshold, the progressive plan to pull America back from the brink.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back. Saw a tweet on comment on Twitter about Judge Bazell, the judge who just ended the airplane mask mandate. And not only the reason why, there's an article in the Tampa Bay Times, about why the American Bar Association said that she was absolutely unqualified to be a federal judge for life at the age of 33. Not only, and they don't cite this. You can find this by, there's a dozen other articles and websites and whatnot. But not only was her husband working with Stephen Miller and the general counsel to to ICE, basically to Immigration and Naturalization, but she never tried a case. She worked on two law cases, two trials in her entire career, and those were when she was a paralegal and attending law school. She never tried a case. Not only had she never been a judge, she had never been a courtroom lawyer. In the 8 years that she was an actual lawyer. Her husband now has a gig with Jones Day, which is one of the big prestigious law firms in Washington, D.C., but anyhow, just an FYI. So I wanted to get to the Democrats' fate in the fall elections. We're seeing polling suggesting that Republicans are going to take control of the House and Senate in November. And, this is concerning for those of us who are not fond of Republican policies of cutting taxes on billionaires, increasing the level of poison and pollution in our air and water, and trying to ban the teaching of American history in our schools, but basically, want to take America back to 1950 in terms of a whole range of things, But Elizabeth Warren is speaking out about this. She wrote an op-ed in the New York Times titled "Democrats Can Avoid Disaster in November." She points out Democrats are the party of working people, and this has always been the case. The party of the really rich is the Republicans, and they managed to bring along a few suckers along the way by also being the party of white supremacy and bigotry, also being the party of hating gay people. Also being the party of, oh my God, look out for the communists. Well, that went away with Donald Trump. Donald Trump embraced the former communists, the Putins and whatnot. He gave lip service to opposing communist China at the same time that, he was cutting deals with them and sucking up to them. The Republican Party has historically said that they're opposed to autocracy, but now you've got Jared Kushner getting a $2 billion bribe from Saudi Arabia because he went against the will of Congress, which voted not to give lethal weaponry to Saudi Arabia to use in Yemen, where 20 million people are right now facing famine because of the Saudi war. They've blockaded the country. And Jared Kushner went over and said, we're going to get around Congress. We're just going to ignore them, and we'll give you the weapons, which is what the Trump administration did. And he's being paid off for that now with this $2 billion. Steve Mnuchin got $1 billion. And we have no idea how many billions they've given to Donald Trump. He's not talking about it. But, how much got wired into his offshore accounts? We just don't know. But anyhow, Elizabeth Warren says, Democrats are the party of working people, and now Republicans are betting that a stalled Biden agenda won't give Democrats enough to run on in the midterm elections. And she says they may be right. Now, this, of course, is why the right-wing billionaires reached out to Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema and said, hey, we'd like to offer you guys a few $1 million if you'll just screw the country for us, along with all of the Republicans in the Senate, the Build Back Better legislation, for example. So she goes on to say, this is Elizabeth Warren, while Republican politicians peddle lies, fear, and division, we should use every single one of the next 200 days or so before the election to deliver meaningful improvements for working people. And she points out if we fail to do that, we're heading toward big losses in the midterms. And I agree with her. She says, first, we need to finalize a budget reconciliation deal. Okay, well, that's going to require a certain level of cooperation with Republicans, or at least a certain level of cooperation with Manchin and Sinema, because you can do reconciliation without any Republicans right now, but you've got two Democrats who have sold out. You know, Joe Manchin is wholly owned by the fossil fuel industry and proud of it. Makes $500,000 a year on his own little oil company, not to mention that he's the largest recipient of fossil fuel contributions in the entire United States Senate. So you've got that with Manchin, and then Kyrsten Sinema is taking money from Big Pharma like there's no tomorrow. So that, and the reason that she blew up Build Back Better was because it would have required or allowed Medicare for the first time to do what the Veterans Administration does, what every hospital in America does, what every insurance company in America does, which is negotiate the price of the pharmaceuticals that they buy. Right now, the pharmaceutical industry is making $60 billion a year in profits, additional profits, because whatever they say is the price of a drug, that's what Medicare pays. And Medicare can't say, hey, you know, we're buying 1 million of these pills or 10 million of these pills. You know, instead of selling them to us at $30 a piece, how about $3? Or how about 5 cents, your manufacturing cost plus a 20% markup or whatever, you know, negotiating what they can get. Literally, the Veterans Administration is buying some of these pharmaceuticals for less than a tenth of what Social Security is being forced to pay for them. But Kyrsten Sinema, she blew that up because she's taking money from pharma and, of course, Manchin with the big bucks. So this is going to be a challenge. But nonetheless, I agree. We need a budget reconciliation deal, and we need one that will get past these two. I'm not optimistic about it. She says also big corporations should be paying their fair share of taxes to fund vital investments in combating climate change and lowering costs for average American families. But again, she says this can only advance with 50 Senate votes. You would think maybe there's a Republican out there who would join. Susan Collins, Mitt Romney, I mean, already they're being attacked by the Trumpy Republicans, the wannabe fascists, the Republicans who want to turn America into a Russia and give Trump, a dictator for life power. So they're already under attack, but I don't think that they're under sufficient attack that they're yet ready to leave the party. Lisa Murkowski, another one. So Elizabeth Warren also talks about some other things Democrats can do. She says, let's begin with corruption. Corruption is a terrible thing. And this was, the op-ed I wrote last week. Corruption is the single most powerful word in politics. Alexei Navalny started an anti-corruption organization that outed the fact that Vladimir Putin was routing money and sweetheart deals to his oligarch buddies and had built his own billion-dollar palace. It looks like Versailles. Down in the South. And, what did Putin do? Try to poison him, and then when that didn't work, threw him in prison. So anyhow, she says, we need to do this. We need to deal with the corruption that is making it hard to tackle things like climate change or income inequality or systemic injustice. And she says, I have the strongest plan and the only bipartisan bill in the Senate to get it done. Good for her. And we need to do that. She said the president deserves enormous credit for advancing an ambitious agenda to promote competition and appointing effective regulators to enforce our antitrust laws. See, this, again, pre-1983, and I'm old enough to remember this, you could visit, in fact, I remember the old Route 66 show from the early 1960s and late 1950s, where Marty Milner and George Maharis were driving across America in their Corvette. And every single week they would stop in a different town, and every town looked different. You had all these locally owned businesses and locally owned banks and locally owned stores and locally owned hotels, and every town had its own local character. Now they're all the same. Now it's all Marriott's and Olive Gardens. And how did that end? Wells Fargo banks. And how did that happen? In 1983, Ronald Reagan told the Justice Department, the Department of Justice, the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Federal Trade Commission to stop enforcing the antitrust laws that have been on the books since 1890 when the Sherman Antitrust Act was passed. Stop enforcing them. And what happened was the next 5 years of his administration, and again, those of you old enough to remember this. Those of you who aren't, watch the movie Wall Street starring Michael Douglas. It was about this era. What happened was all these the giant companies that existed started buying up all the small and medium-sized companies. This was called mergers and acquisition. And we had this mergers and acquisition mania. Michael Milken, kind of epitomized it. And the result of that is that now, 40 years later, there are no small and medium-sized businesses of any consequence left. I mean, go to your local mall. There might be one store that's a local family-owned store. It used to be the majority of them. There would be one, like a Sears anchoring the store, and then all these locally owned stores. No more. And as a result, entrepreneurialism is dead in America. People don't start businesses anymore thinking, hey, I'll pass this along to my children and grandchildren, this dry cleaner store or this pharmacy or what. No, now people start a business thinking, I'll build it up to the point where I can sell it off to the giants before they squash me like a bug. This is not the American way. This is the Republican way, right? Big business, the billionaires, the oligarchs. Again, this is the Republican Party trying to turn America into Russia. So she says, let's take this on. Aggressive antitrust action. I like the idea. She said we can stand up to the armies of lobbyists and PR flacks and tackle tax loopholes for the rich and powerful. Good idea. Most of the billionaires in America pay nothing in taxes or very little. The 25 richest people in America last year or the year before last paid an effective 3.4% income tax. How much did you pay? By a margin of more than 2 to 1, she notes, Americans support providing some student loan debt cancellation. The president can do that for about half of student borrowers on his own, the half that have federal student loans. Those that have private student loans, they're kind of SOL, but at least we can do a start on this. And she said lowering prescription drug prices and making sure that more workers are eligible for overtime pay. Good idea. And it wouldn't take 50 votes in the Senate. So is this administration going to be able to get big things done in time for the election? And will that be enough to win the election? Or is the propaganda war, as it were, where you've got 1,500 right-wing radio stations heavily invested in by the oligarchs again? I met one of these billionaires who owned a radio network of over 900 stations, and said, how'd you like to put my show on your? You've got hundreds of stations carrying right-wing hosts. And he's like, I'll never put a guy on the air who wants to raise my taxes. Never. How do you cut through that?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And now you've got Rick Scott, the guy in charge of getting Republicans reelected to the Senate, saying, let's lower taxes on billionaires and raise taxes on the bottom 90% of Americans. And welcome back. Picking up your phone calls. Gary in Alpharetta, Georgia. Hey, Gary, what's up?
Hi, Tom.
Hey, Gary.
How's Mr. Thom Hartmann?
Greed has no heart, sir.
Ever. And this is why I called for the 1,000th time. And you're very well said, by the way, but I have something to say about greed. This is exactly people such as Kushner, Trump. They're not in front of me, but I'd say in front of them. I would. Trump and Mr. Scott of Florida. They are they are great examples of this continued poison in our culture. Mm-hmm. Greed. Greed is a poison. I got another way to describe it. Greed is a poisonous mentality that in reality continues to spread and attack our democracy and a decent way of life. Period.
That's why it's one of the cardinal sins.
So we will see in closing, we will see going forward if more Americans can wake up and stop riding the extra change that they have in their pocket and and make an effort to reject these people at the ballot box, at the ballot box. Because I'm starting to wonder if voting will be enough. But we certainly have to vote. Get these people, their mentality, their greedy mentality, out of our democracy, or there will not be a democracy. And we're both coming from the same page with it.
Yeah, no, I get it, and completely agree with you, Gary. Very, very well said. Thank you, Karen in New Orleans. Hey, Karen, what's up?
Oh, Tom. The Democrats seem to have a bipolar behavioral problem. Not only do we have the most rude, crude, and socially unacceptable human being in this country giving his mesmerized clan permission to be rude, crude, and socially unacceptable, but the Democrats were taught manners and courtesy and the golden rule of don't call people names if you don't want to be called names. And the Republicans have decided that PC are scarlet letters, and that's some kind of bad thing. And I love the Obamas, but Michelle's high road, low road thing did not work.
Yeah.
We have got to fight fire.
When they go low, you kick their ass. That's my slogan.
And I don't believe two wrongs make a right. I'm just saying, grow a pair, and start fighting, and don't be so damn polite.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But it's getting too close to this election, and we got to fight fire with fire.
You know what's amazing though, Karen?
Let them get away with this.
Jamie Harrison, the head of the DNC,
writing letters all the time.
He came on my program and he said these Republicans are fascists. And I thought, oh my God, somebody's going to pull that clip off my show and it's going to explode and he's going to end up having to apologize. Well, he's said that now on multiple programs, but no other Democrat will use that word. And it's
writing
making
letters
me crazy.
all the time. I'm reading your book on Big Brother, and I do not use computers or cell phones, and I thank the Lord that I don't.
Yes. Karen, thank you.
Thank you.
Our Luddite caller, I appreciate it. It's great to hear from you. 22 minutes past the hour. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. Remember Paul Manafort? He used to be business partners with Roger Stone back in the day, working for Republican politicians like, Nixon and Reagan. Well, in 2004, he took a really sweet gig over in Ukraine, helping the Russians, President Putin, install Viktor Yanukovych as the president of Ukraine, a nice Putin puppet. That same year, though, the people of Ukraine said enough, and basically Yanukovych got driven out of the country. So they tried it again in 2010. Let's bring, this Putin puppet back into Ukraine, Yanukovych. And it worked until 2014 when they got kicked out. So he gets kicked out of Ukraine, Manafort. So what does he do the next year, 2015? He decides to run the Trump campaign. Are you starting to see a pattern here? Yeah, could be. Okay, there's an entire video that outlines this whole timeline over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. Welcome back. 24 minutes past the hour. And, so much to talk about here. So little time, as it were. Say what? Too much coffee. There you go. Daniel in Manchester, New Hampshire. Hey, Daniel, what's on your mind?
First off, it's now Daniel in Columbia, South Carolina.
Okay, I'll fix that. So what's up?
Yes, sir. I was kind of commenting on pretty much everything everybody else has said. To a certain extent, I agree with Pam that we're going to hell in a handbasket, and I feel like every day you illustrate that. You just said Reagan stopped the enforcement of the Sherman Antitrust Act back in the day. You have stated that Reagan stopped prosecuting employers who hire undocumented immigrants. Pretty much everything that the right rails against, Reagan created. Now, the problem with the Democrats is they've never corrected it.
Yeah, I know. And a lot of them were I mean, you know, from the 80s until just the last 5 years or so in a big way, much of the Democratic Party has bought into Reagan's neoliberalism. That doesn't mean that both parties are terrible. It doesn't mean that they're both the same.
No.
And the good news is that, you know, it's probably fewer than half of Democrats are still in that old kind of Bill Clinton mindset of you know, free trade is wonderful, and, you know, ship our jobs overseas. It's a good thing for us, and all that kind of stuff. Privatize Medicare. Yes, great idea. And progressives are having their day. Yeah, go ahead, Daniel.
Well, are they having their day, though? I agree with you that we have the momentum.
Yeah.
I think that we are the future of the party, but, like, how much longer can we wait? And though we may have the energy and the youth, they still, like, the moderate wing, the conservative wing of the Democratic Party, they still have the clout. They're still the ones getting things done. And, you know, Joe Biden, like, I keep thinking that he's going to do it. You know, he's going to be the next FDR. But remember, part of his campaign was, I'm going to cancel $50,000 in student loan debt. Just done. Like, I'm going to do it. I can do it on my own. I can do it with the stroke of a pen. Why isn't he doing it?
Well, it's a good question.
And I talked to
I am guessing, and this is just a total cynical take on it, but I'm guessing that he'll do it in the fall so that people will remember it during the election.
But see, and if he does that, we win, and, you know.
On the other hand, it may blow back at him, you know, because the minute he does it, the Republicans are going to go hysterical. So.
Well, I'm not too worried about that, though, because as you said, Rick Scott is saying he's going to raise taxes on us anyway. So I think if we were to,
there you go.
You know,
Daniel, I'm sorry, I'm out of time here. I missed the break. We'll be right back with more of your calls after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
So how does the Democratic Party win elections this fall? What do we do? We'll be back. Today we're reading from Dorfman and Mallart's book, How to Read Donald Duck, Imperialist Ideology in the Disney Comic. And this is from the preface to the English edition. This book was first published in Spanish. To say that this book was burnt in Chile should not come as a surprise to anyone. Hundreds of books were destroyed and thousands more prohibited and censored. It was written in the middle of 1971, in the middle of the Chilean revolutionary process. Copper had been rescued, the land was being returned to the peasantry, the whole Chilean people were recovering the industries that during the 20th century had been the means of enrichment for Mr. Rockefeller, Grace, Guggenheim, and Morgan. Because this process was intolerable to the United States government and its multinational corporations, it had to be stopped. They organized a plan which at the time was suspected and since has been confirmed by Mr. Kissinger, Ford, and Colby to have been directed and financed by the United States intelligence services. Their objective was to overthrow the constitutional government of Chile. To realize their objective, an invisible blockade was imposed. Credits were denied, spare parts purchased for industrial machinery were not sent, and later the Chilean state bank accounts in the U.S. were blocked, and an embargo preventing the sale of Chilean copper throughout the world was organized. There were, however, two items which were not blocked: planes, tanks, ships, and technical assistance for the Chilean armed forces, and magazines, TV serials, advertising, and public opinion polls for the Chilean mass media, which continued for the most part to be in the hands of a small group which was losing its privileges. To maintain them with those of the U.S., their media prepared the climate for the bourgeois insurrection, which finally materialized some years later on the 11th of September, 1973. Each day, with expert U.S. advice, in each newspaper, each weekly, each monthly magazine, each news dispatch, each movie, and each comic book, their arsenal of psychological warfare was fortified. In the words of General Pinochet, the point was, quote, to conquer the minds, end quote, while in the words of Donald Duck in the magazine Dislandia, published in December 1971,
coinciding with the first mass rallies of native fascism, the so-called March of the Empty Pots and Pans. The point was to, quote, restore the king. But the people did not want the restoration of the king, nor of the businessman. The popular Chilean cultural offensive, which accompanied the social and economic liberation, took multiple forms: wall paintings, popular papers, TV programs, motion pictures, theater, songs, literature. In all areas of human activity, with differing degrees of intensity, the people expressed their will. Perhaps the most important arm of this offensive was the work of the state publishing house, Quimantu, a word meaning sunshine of knowledge in the language of the Chilean Machupe Indians. In 2.5 years, it published 5 million books, twice the amount that had been published in all of Chile during the previous 70 years. In addition, it transformed the content of some of the magazines it had inherited from before the popular unity government and created new ones. It is in this multifaceted context, with the people on the march to cultural liberation, a process was also meant criticizing the mass cultural merchandise exported so profitably by the U.S. into the Third World, that How to Read Donald Duck was generated. We simply answered a practical need. It was not an academic exercise. For the Mad Dog Warriors on that September 11th, there were no paintings on the walls. There were only enormous stains which dirtied the city in memory. They, using the fascist youth brigades, whitewashed all the signing, many-colored walls of the nation. They broke records, murdered singers, destroyed radios and printing presses, imprisoned and executed journalists, so that nothing would be left to remind anybody of anything about the struggle for national liberation. But it was not enough to clean these cultural stains from the street. The most important task was to eliminate all those who bore the stain inside themselves: the fighters, workers, peasants, employees, students, and patriotic soldiers, to eliminate these creators of a new life, to eliminate this new life which grew, and for all that we created. This book, conceived for the Chilean people and our urgent needs, produced in the midst of our struggle, is now being published far from Chile in the uncle land of Disney, behind the barbed wire network of ITT. Mr. Disney, we are returning your duck, feathers plucked and well roasted. Look inside, you can see the handwriting on the wall, our hands still writing on the wall, Donald, to go home. This is written in 1975. And then this from David Kunzel's introduction. The names of the presidents change. That of Disney remains. 46 years after the birth of Mickey Mouse, 8 years after the death of his master, Disney's may be the most widely known North American name in the world. He is arguably the century's most important figure in bourgeois popular culture. He has done more than any single person to disseminate around the world certain myths upon which that culture has thrived, notably that of an innocence supposedly universal, beyond place, beyond time, and beyond criticism. The myth of U.S. political innocence is at last being dismantled, and the reality which it masks lies in significant areas exposed to public view. But the great American dream of cultural innocence still holds a global imagination in thrall. The first major breach into the Disney of this dream was made by Richard Schickel's The Disney Version, The Lifetimes and Commerce of Walt Disney, the book How to Read Donald Duck.
Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. And welcome back. 34 minutes past the hour, the last half hour of the program. Tom in North Hollywood, California. Hey, Tom, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. First off, we the people are supposed to be the government, and we must never forget that.
That's the theory.
Second, I am a proud FDR Democrat, and I know some people think that FDR is long and gone, but I think the Democrats need to bring back FDR and do just what you do every single day, which is talk about his actual policies and become that type of person. Not a Bernie-crat, because Bernie didn't win 4 elections, but FDR did win 4 presidential elections with the way he did it. Second, I'm not saying, that this Tucker Carlson is a gay man or anything like that, but I got to tell you, Tom, he's got probably one of the most homoerotic videos I've seen on on video in quite some time. So I don't know if the new thing with Florida is that they just call it bro therapy, which is the new gay,
bro therapy,
or what. But that's what they're calling it. They're calling it bromeo therapy.
Yeah, this is the testicle tanning that you're talking about. The Tucker Carlson was advertising. It's all over Twitter right now.
And a bunch of guys getting together to spend time with each other to actually increase their masculinity somehow, I guess. But as a gay man, like I said, I saw the video and I was like, wow, this is pretty good.
You wonder if this is the conservative version of, basically kind of trans people and things. I mean, people who are not Republicans, who don't feel comfortable identifying as a straight male, have other options. But if you're a Republican and you're supposed to hate trans people and you're supposed to hate gay people and, all that kind of stuff, then what do? I guess you get together with Tucker Carlson, with another kind of, doughy white boy and get naked and show off your muscles and put your testicles in a big bright light contraption of some kind that's supposed to tan them. I mean, I'm not making this stuff up. You gotta, if you're listening to me right now and you don't know what I'm talking about, you gotta check out this video that Tucker Carlson has put out. It's all these chunky guys, with big, muscles and stuff, and hanging their testicles into this machine that lights them up, and it's bizarre.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, myself as a gay man, I kind of appreciated the video, whoever made it. But for a straight man, I don't know if they're watching this and they're getting, some type of testosterone jump from it or whatever, then I think they might want to check their own orientation.
Well, that's my point. And, this is the only safe way that Republicans who are not straight men can hang out in ways that might seem lots of fun to them is to do this whole Tucker Carlson thing, I guess.
Like I said, they don't like to be called gay, but I would say gay on this thing. That's for sure.
I get it. Yeah, it's pretty breathtaking. Tom, thanks a lot for the call. It's always nice to hear from you. Danny in Mill Valley, California. Hey, Danny, what's on your mind?
Yeah, Tom, first-time caller. Thanks for the air.
Sure.
I think labels are really important, and I think if liberals and conservatives both knew that we didn't have a democracy, they would demand a democracy. Mm-hmm. And then we know that Bush wouldn't have been elected and Trump wouldn't have been elected if we had a democracy.
Did you see where Mike Lee yesterday refused to say that America is a democracy?
No, I would have liked that.
That's bizarre.
We have to know the truth before we can. They won't legislate. If they tell you you're free and you've got all the rights you need and whatever, then you don't. But
a democracy is, by dictionary definition, a democracy is a form of government where a representative democracy anyway, where the elected leaders who serve are the ones who got the majority of the votes, who got the most votes. And of course, that's no longer a Republican value. They've changed the laws in 22 states now. And in some of those states, they've changed the laws to say that when the majority of the voters vote for a certain person for president, the legislature of the state can override that vote. That's literally not a democracy. That's a Putin-Russia kind of thing. That's exactly what Putin did in Russia, that the Duma can override the votes of the people.
And that's my point. And yeah, how many times, Tom, you're one of the few people that I bet would know the answer to this. I asked everybody, nobody knows how many times is the word democracy noted in our Constitution.
Well, it's not, but the word... The word democracy and the word republic in the 1770s meant basically the same thing, as James Madison wrote about at some length.
Yeah, I believe, though, that those guys were smart enough. If they wanted a democracy, they would have put that in.
No, here's what happened. This is actually a fascinating story, Danny, and I wrote about this in a book that I wrote like 15 years ago called What Would Jefferson Do? Was that it had been 2,000 years since there had been anything that resembled 3,000 years since the Greek democracy. So they were selling a form of government to people who had all literally for 100 generations only known kings or popes. They had only known kingdoms or theocracy. And so these guys were trying to sell the idea of democracy to them. And so what they had to do was essentially set up a straw man. And you'll find some of the writings of the founders. In fact, Jefferson actually wrote about this, saying we are not creating a democracy. And by that, what they meant was a pure Greek democracy. In the Greek democracy, you had to have 6,000 people show up for any decision to be made. Everybody showing up to be a member of that demos, of that legislature, was like jury duty. Everybody had to do it. Every year it changed, and you got drawn by, you drew straws, and so they said, we're not doing that. We're creating a representative form of government where a majority of the people vote for the representatives, and we're going to call this a republic, a Republican form of government. And so there's a certain amount, and you can see some of this in Federalist 10. There's a certain amount of and some of it in Federalist number 1, actually, there's a certain amount of trash talking of democracy by the founders, but it wasn't what you and I would call democracy. And Madison, long after he left the White House, in some of his correspondences with Jefferson, just goes into this at length, how this was a political strategy to say we're creating a republic. But that's why the Democratic Republican Party, Thomas Jefferson founded the modern day Democratic Party. It's the oldest and longest lasting political party in the history of the world. And it was from the time that Jefferson founded this in the 1790s up until the 1830s, it was called the Democratic Republican Party. And then they dropped the word Republican in the 1830s. And that word got revived in 1856 when the modern Republican Party was founded. But, bottom line, they were talking about what we call democracy today. And they were very clear about it.
Yeah, well, I believe in direct democracy or participatory democracy. That's what I want.
Yeah, well, that's not what they wanted. So to that point, you're correct, Danny.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot for the call. Patty in Columbus, Ohio. Hey, Patty, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. How are you today, sir?
I am great, but I'll get better. How about you?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Swansha. I'm talking to you because you're one of the great researchers I know of. I Googled what the limits of the presidential executive order were, and I got sent to the archives, which just told me which president used it how many times.
Right.
So can you give me a source to see what limits, if any, are on the presidential order?
To the best of my knowledge, there are no specific constitutional limits on presidential orders. The problem is that the Constitution basically defines the authorities of Congress, and so presumably the president can't overstep those, although some executive orders, in my opinion, have overstepped the president's power. I can't give you a reference, Patty. I'm sorry. The ultimate check in our system, as it's written right now, or as it operates right now, is the Supreme Court on determining whether an executive order is constitutional or not. So,
good luck with that.
Yeah. There you go. Okay, thanks a lot for the call, Patty. Katie in Hamul. Hey, Katie, what's up?
Well, last time I called you, I was in Perth.
Yeah, that's right. You were in Australia.
In Perth, and yeah, and that was just a couple of weeks ago. And I can just tell you this: I was sustained for over 2 years in Australia, being bathed in the various English accents, American accents, and the brilliant opinions. And I listened every day on Patreon. But what I want to say is, I am already today. Can you hear me? Okay.
Pardon?
Okay,
yeah,
I already, because you're a little faint. Thank you to all of Thom Hartmann's family out there from a stranded American. I love you all. But I'm back here, and I am already canceling my flight back to Australia, the domestic part, which is San Diego to Los Angeles, as of today, as of this morning. And I'm paying a friend, a young man, to drive me up when I leave. I am not flying on an American airline. And so I hope that a lot of people are doing the same thing.
Yeah, all the European airlines are keeping their mask mandates in place.
Qantas, I would like to, if you had time and you don't, it would be boring. What I had to go through was so much to fly on Qantas that my husband and I drove up was about a 45-minute drive up to the airport the week before to run through what we had to do, and it was all reasonable, but it was kind of confusing, a little changing, and we're kind of old folks, and we did that, and
you
that
have
was
to get,
that. So
isn't it that you have to get a COVID test within 24 hours of departure? And
absolutely.
And
so we got
that.
it right at the airport because the flight it takes me 34 hours to get here,
right?
And so we got about as close as departure time, and they have it right there at the airport.
Right, and then
so
and
they
then you
have
have
the
to wear a
rapid
mask on the
antigen
plane.
test. Yeah. And then I went through Melbourne as a stopover. You get checked again that you have it, and of course we have the app on our phone that shows all of your vaccinations. Everybody looked at it, and we could do this in the U.S. There is nothing more progressive about Australia than our progressive or our liberal side of America. Right. It's just that Rupert Murdoch got sunk in there more deeply. But what I really quickly wanted to say, if there is time, is that I had a lot of I would call them, though I've never been drunken phone calls because I'm so jet lagged and I'm 74. But I had a lot of phone calls that my sisters couldn't make for me, utilities, and this goes on banks and da 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 da. And with every one
because you were
of
gone for 2 years.
Because I was gone for over 2 years, and my husband is Australian, and my kids live in Australia, though I haven't seen them because they were on the East Coast and we couldn't leave, and it was very, very, very tight and fortress.
Right.
And
but to get to your
Western
point,
Australia.
Katie.
But anyway, the phone calls that I made, every single one of them, and I do this all the time. We politically active family for 2 generations. Is I test a little. Can I say something? And I found 100% this time of people on the other end, probably very busy, wanted to talk about something political that's going on in the U.S. I found the most receptive people, people really worried about what's going on here. And since I've been doing this for years, any chance I talk, and I hear so many of your callers say the same thing, just say something to the checker. Just say something to, people that you see every day, but you might just say, hi, how are you doing? Just go a little, see if there's a political in there.
Let them know that they're not alone.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The people that you call on the airline.
And
the people.
I ask them if they know who their senators are, and I look it up for them.
Good on you, Katie. Good on you. Well, welcome back to the United States. It's great to hear from you, and thanks for the call. That's amazing. We'll be right back. It's coming up on 48 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Breaking news. President Biden says he's going to send more artillery to Ukraine. We'll see how this plays out. And welcome back. No? What's going on? But, whatever. We are back. And Pat in Bellevue, Washington. Hey, Pat, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I was going to tell you, I read the someone's letter to the Economist last night, and I loved it. And I thought you might be interested. He was a South African person, and the question was, he said, "Is it too late for if we said anarchist instead of oligarchist instead of oligarchist?"
Anarchists?
Yes.
I don't know what that word means.
Well, energy. He's energy.
Oh, energy. Oh, so we're creating a new word from the words energy and oligarch to anarcharch.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it probably fits a few people, but I don't know that it's going to. I don't know how that's going to catch on. But thanks for the call, Pat. Johan in Los Angeles. Hey, Johan, what's up?
Can I add something to the thing that you talk about the Jefferson?
Sure.
I mentioned about term limits before, and here's the letter from Jefferson to Madison back in the day, and he said this, like, every constitution and then every law naturally expires at the end of 19 years. If it be enforced longer, it is an act of force and not of right. So
that was his letter where he said that requiring people to live by a constitution that was put into force by the previous generation is like making a man wear the clothes that he wore as a child. Am I correct in my recollection?
Yeah, you talk about the earth. The earth belongs always.
Yeah, the earth is unsufract to the living, which is a word I had never encountered before. But yeah, and this is Jefferson arguing that every generation should exercise the right to amend the Constitution, basically. So what's your point? Will
this work in today's political climate? Because I just heard that South Africa changed their constitution from scratch.
Yeah, they did
a while ago.
At the end of apartheid, they wrote a brand new constitution. There are right wingers who want to make that happen. The oil billionaires have been funding for decades now a movement to have what they call convention of states. That's their hashtag, and I think conventionsofstates.org or .com is their website. And every year they get together in Washington, D.C., and they do a dress rehearsal, a practice of this. And they only need a couple more states to be able to call what's called an Article 5 convention. You've got to have 2/3 of the states to do this, and they've gotten fairly close on a couple of occasions, and they want to amend the Constitution in ways that would comport with right wingers. I don't know of any left wing attempts to amend the Constitution. I think it's a very dangerous thing to open up the Constitution for tinkering, and would prefer to use the amendment process, which is what ultimately Jefferson was talking about. Johan, thanks a lot for the call. I get it that every generation should put their mark. It seems like the major changes to our Constitution and our constitutional order seem to happen about every 80 years, though. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. So how do you know which party has the most crooks in it? The Republicans are always saying, oh, those Democrats are soft on crime and, a lot of murders in Democrat-run cities. Well, for the record, first off, red states and red counties have a higher per capita murder rates than do blue states and blue counties. This is just a fact. But secondly, let's look at some of the administrations. I mean, the Obama administration had no criminal indictments. The Jimmy Carter administration had 1. The Bill Clinton administration had 2. But what about the Republican administrations? It was 16 for George W. Bush. It was 26 criminal indictments for Ronald Reagan. Richard Nixon's administration had 76 criminal indictments. And of course, the full-time professional rapist and grifter, Donald Trump, he had 215 criminal indictments. So who's really soft on crime? We got a video about it over at thomhartmann.com. You can check it out. And welcome back. Picking up your phone calls here. Mary in Long Beach, California. Hey, Mary, what's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Tom. Very interesting show today.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. And I think you've got the best informed voters in the country. I wish you were on national media 3 hours a day.
Well, we are.
You could really. I mean the big boys.
Oh, you mean on network television or something? Yeah.
Yeah, the guy who wouldn't put you on if you're going to raise his taxes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But what I wanted to say is, I know everybody that listens to you is going to vote, and they're all going to do their part, and they're all well-informed. But there's a whole lot of Democratic voters who are not paying attention and who don't vote in the midterms, and we're in a crisis. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of people, Democrats particularly, who are feeling pretty discouraged about, is there anything they can do? It's like hopeless. Yeah. And I just have a suggestion that, all the Democrats, particularly all your listeners, because they're so well informed, you say you want a message for the Democrats or a slang or a motto or something. I would say find a Democratic friend of yours or make a Democratic friend who doesn't intend to vote in the midterms, make that your project. And the slogan should be, bring a friend to the midterms, double the turnout, save democracy.
I like it. Bring a friend to the midterms, double turnout, save democracy. Mary Brilliant, thank you very much. Ronald in Outlander, North Carolina, it says you want to disagree with me, Ronald. What did I do wrong this time?
Well, we're not ever going to agree on politics, but I heard you said you don't like to discuss the Bible, but you said in the New Testament it doesn't say anything about homosexuality.
No, I said Jesus. Well, I meant to say Jesus doesn't say anything about homosexuality. I believe that there's a reference that Paul made in Corinthians, but Jesus had nothing to do with that.
Well, it's supposed to be God's words.
Well, if you want to interpret it as God's words, I'm happy with listening to Jesus' words. I'm not all that certain that what Paul had to say was inspired by God.
Well, the Bible's, they always say the truth's in the Bible. I mean, people try to say the Bible's a lie, but it's not. I mean, it is the truth.
So you think that people who have extramarital affairs should be put to death? Well, you think that children who talk back to their parents should be put to death? The Bible explicitly says that. It's in Deuteronomy or Leviticus, one or the other.
It also says in that same thing that you can be forgiven of that stuff. But
after you've died. Come on, Ronald. If you believe the Bible literally, you're going to kill your children if they talk back to you.
Oh, no, I don't think so. I wouldn't go that far to it.
It's in the Bible, Ronald.
No, it's not in the Bible.
It absolutely is. It's part of the Ten Commandments. I mean, literally, it's part of the Ten Commandments that you must put your child to death if they speak back to you. Ronald, I got to run. But, it's like arguing the Bible. I don't know. I've only read it 4 times. Anyway, it's a conversation for another time. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us, whether you agree with me or not. Get out there, get active, tag you're it. And bring a friend to vote, right? We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
Tag you're it.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy by Thom Hartmann. More information at all book outlets. Wild Alaskan Company, 100% sustainable wild-caught seafood delivered right to your door. More info at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. Cozy Earth, better sleep, better you. More info at cozyearth.com, promo code TOM. The latest views and opinions from U.S. politics and other fascinating subjects too, including cutting-edge science reports at hartmanreport.com. And Dinovite, a whole food supplement for your pet's immune system. More info at dinovite.com.